we get this last thing.
All right, I would like to call to order this meeting of the Hartford Select Board on Tuesday, July 12th, 2022 at 6 p.m. Our town manager is ill and will not be with us tonight, except for possibly an item later on the agenda. We may be able to get her. So we'll just do the best that we can without her here. If there are questions that we need her to answer, we'll certainly make a note of them and get them to her. I'm just looking at the screen. It says we're going to begin shortly, but I think
where is our town manager?
she's ill. So we will be without her tonight. All right, next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. Would anyone like to lead us this
I
evening?
will gladly.
Okay.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Local Liquor Control Board. We have no applications to weigh on. Order of agenda. Would anyone like to change anything or just look good?
Question about the executive session that is on the agenda.
Yep.
Are we still going to hold that as an executive session, or do we discuss that at that time?
I think we can discuss it at that time with the caveat that the item that we would have discussed in public session and voted on never made it into the public agenda packet. So if we want to take up this particular issue tonight, I think we can do it in executive session and then come out and vote. Otherwise, we may table it for a meeting.
I asked a question based on the email that I sent this morning that you and the vice chair.
Yeah, and if I would be happy to discuss it in public session, but the language we were discussing was not in the packet. So I don't believe that anyone got to see it. And I think generally we would want to have the public aware of what it is if we're going to vote on it, but it is something that we can also take up in executive session.
So can I ask for that to be removed from the agenda then?
The executive session?
Yes.
If there was majority support to table the issue of the police contract, we can, if there's majority support for it.
Yeah, because I prefer to have our town manager here for that discussion.
She will be able to phone in on that particular item. That is the one she said she'd be willing to give it a shot.
Okay, Kim.
I mean, I would just add that we just got the documentation on it like 15 minutes ago or something. So if we were, regardless if it were public or in executive session, I'd want to like take a few minutes to be able to review it. So,
I based on that, it alone, I think it's worth it tabling it for another night. And I'm not sure, like I say, if now is the time to do that during the agenda discussion, or if the time to do that is at the time where we have that on the agenda.
I think if we're going to remove the item from the agenda, we might as well just do it now.
Okay, so I would make a motion to remove the agenda item for executive session from the agenda.
Is there any comment from anyone else on how they'd like to proceed?
well, we haven't a second yet. And
My only concern is I don't know how time sensitive it is.
Yeah, I feel that the same way.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
Because if we were to table, we would be revisiting this in 2 weeks.
I know, and I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure that I personally feel it's a subject that should be just deliberated in open session. And therefore, I would like to be able to do that, but I want to be able to have it warned so the public knows what's happening in order to do so.
Yeah.
So that's therefore I would like to see it wait till we can have it on agenda and discussed in an open session where the public's warned.
yeah,
I think that's fair to the public considering what it is.
is there a second yet?
There's no second yet.
I'll second. I mean, I'll second, and then for discussion, I mean, the town manager did say they prefer that we don't table the CBA issue.
Mhm. What was that?
Like in the email that we just got.
Again, I just haven't read it.
Yeah. So the option would be we either table it entirely or we discuss it in executive session.
Yeah, I believe those are the two options.
Can you say the two options again?
We either table it because it's not on the public agenda, and it can be done in executive session, doesn't have to be, but we do have an executive session on the agenda specifically to discuss that. So the options are do the executive session or table it, and there is an express sense of preference to not table it.
Right, well, if we were to have an executive session and discuss it, there's nothing that would prohibit us from still warning the issue and having a public conversation about that too, is that correct? So it seems the
Yeah.
best that we just keep both. Does that make sense?
My preference is to have it on public, on the agenda.
There's
So
nothing that would prohibit us from doing that in 2 weeks as well.
if we discussed it in executive session, there's no reason to bring it forward on open session.
And if we make any decisions, we would need to vote on it in public. So, like we would come out of executive session, and if there's something we're gonna move.
As I say, as the email that I sent to the board this morning and the follow-up email that I got from the town manager stated that myself and the chair and the vice chair stated it did not have to go to executive session, that it could be discussed in open session. And because of the statements that I had in my email, I believe that it's open and it should be open for the public to know what's happening in regards to that.
All right, well, we can call the vote.
Okay, so we've got a motion and a second, which would be to remove the executive session from our agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay.
It was.
We'll do roll call.
We get roll call that one. Shall we do it again? All right, so again, all those in favor of removing the executive session from our agenda say, well, I'm sorry, roll call. Lanny?
Aye.
Nay.
Okay, nay. Mary?
Nay.
Dan?
Nay.
Kim?
Nay.
And I will vote nay. All right, any other items on the agenda that you want to discuss? Kim?
I would like to pull the contract for namely out of consent agenda.
Okay. Can we put that before commission reports? Is everyone okay with that? It's an item F on the board reports, motions and ordinances.
I do have also one to go for. There was one dealing, I'm not sure if that was the one that was dealing with the ARPA funds listed in that. Well, there's one.
No, that was,
Structural turnout.
yeah, wasn't that the structural turnout year bid award?
Okay, I like that one.
Certainly
Not-
check.
Wait, no,
No, it wasn't that one. There's so much going on here, so. Here we go. Yeah. All right, hang tight. Something that listed the use of ARPA funds.
I know what you're talking about. Some of this one.
And that is,
I think that's the Clean Water State Revolving Fund.
okay, I want that one. I would like that pulled out of.
Wait.
Considered that.
part of the water filter media.
That is,
Oh, nice.
was that the loan amendment for the combined sewer outflow? Any event, very confused here.
Yeah, it's. Checking it out right now. Sorry about this.
No, don't worry about it. I believe it's the one after namely.
Oh, wait, I just found it. It's the CSO, the Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund. Well, we had previously met our borrowing limits as approved by the select board. ARPA funds have made it possible. for
Yeah,
us to amend
that's the one I want to pull out. I
Yeah.
want to find out.
Okay, so we'll pull out the contract for namely as item F on the board reports, motions and ordinances, and then we'll pull out the loan amendment for combined sewer outflow as a G.
Thank you.
Any other agenda items we'd like to discuss? All right, if not, we'll move to public comments. So public comment, we'll start with folks in the room and then people who are joining us by Zoom. You'll have 5 minutes to speak, which may or may not be indicated on this timer.
Nothing to do with time.
And we ask that you address the board as a whole, no personal attacks. You can go right up to the microphone and state your name and town or village of residence. Start with people in the room.
My name is Bob Holmes. I live on Latham Works Lane. This is to the local PD and the selectmen. We have a drastic situation on Latham Works Lane where we have somebody dealing drugs on the second floor of a house. And we have a lot of transit going into that house. And people are literally afraid to come out of their house at night. The parents don't even want the kids playing outside. We have a lot of elderly on that street. There's been a lot of things stolen out of backyards, and the police are well aware of this, and we're in a situation where we don't know what to do. I'm a concerned citizen, and the situation has got out of hand. I'm really concerned for the street. I've lived in that street for 3 years. I'm not a taxpayer in this town, but I've lived in this town for 3 years and I love it here. I just wanted to bring this to the selectmen's attention, and I was hoping somebody from the PD was here. We get some input or something.
Have you spoken with the PD or have they
Yes,
spoken
they've
with
been
you?
down there more than once, more than 10 times,
Okay,
and we just feel that not enough is being done.
Okay.
And it may even get worse, but I don't know. I hate to see somebody hurt.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Mr. Chairman, hold up a second, sir, if you will.
Sure.
Sorry, what was your first name again?
your time.
Robert? Robert, do you have any idea if the people are local people that you're seeing? having
Yes.
drug- They're
Yes.
local people. And
Yes.
do you know if they're from that neighborhood or do you know if
No.
they're?
No,
Okay.
these are transit people that are coming in. We see cars in and out of that driveway from New Hampshire, Florida, bringing this stuff up. We believe it's heroin.
Okay, all right.
People from Vermont walk in, and this is going on hours of the night, 3 a.m. in the morning to Sunday morning, 11 a.m. I could tell you every different time.
So, Mr. Chairman, I have received a comment from citizen as well in regards to the, I guess alleged possibility of drug dealing going on in that neighborhood. And this individual's reached out to PD as well. So it's definitely not just one individual down there that's noticing this. And it's something that I'm not sure whether we can do stepped up patrols down there or what, but that's definitely something we have to get a grasp on. So
I think we can bring it to the attention of the chief.
yeah, definitely it's not something that falls on deaf ears when you bring something like that
I understand.
before this board. And to see that happening with my town is devastating to me. And
I love this
I'm
town.
gonna
I'm sorry.
see what's gonna happen. Yeah. So it will be taken forward and it will be addressed.
Thank you very
I'm
much.
And
not sure.
certainly people should keep calling the PD if they see
We do.
activity that's illegal. Okay.
We're very proactive. We also formed a neighborhood watch unofficially,
Mhm.
but the house is directly across from where I live,
Okay.
and it's gotten really out of hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I don't know if I've heard from the same person as Lanny, but I've also heard from citizens in that neighborhood about that concern. And I've reached out to the police department and I understand that they are doing the best that they know so far, but that said, the outcome is what matters. So I think that working to find a solution. I also want to just say that I admire your courage for coming up to a public meeting and saying that. So I appreciate that. And I take great admiration in that.
Kim?
Also have heard comments from residents on that neighborhood as well as long-term issues on Hillcrest. And certainly we know up on Taps Flat and in the downtown business community, basically a step in the right direction in addition to like relying on our stressed, short-staffed police department is go forward with the community safety review that I have been requesting for about 3 years now and exploring the possibilities of crisis intervention team that can support and collaborate with our local law enforcement for things exactly like this.
To be honest with you, I prefer they get arrested and taken off that street.
True, but we know the limitations. I mean, we shouldn't go in a long back and forth, but yeah, I appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We could put
Thank you, Robert.
our horse stables down there. Yeah, horse stables.
Anyone else in the room like to comment publicly? Emily?
Hi, folks. My name is Emily Zanleone, and I live in Wilder. And this evening, I'm wearing the Executive Director of the Hartford Community Coalition hat. So first, I just want to say thank you so much for everything that you very few people do listening to us week after week. It's not an easy job. It's pretty thankless. And it is a job because we kind of pay you. So thank you very much for listening to us week after week. My plea to you is that we have an opportunity right now to set ourselves up in the best way possible by creating a local cannabis control commission. I appreciate very much that it's on the agenda this evening and that you've taken our request extremely seriously and always responding to my emails. So thank you very much for that. I feel as though the select board does a lot. You have to be kind of experts in a lot of different things. And I think that cannabis is one of those things that you don't have to be the experts on, that you have a lot of experts within the community, within the town office building that can offer some support to you when making decisions around cannabis in town. I would ask, as I put in an email earlier to you or late last week, I would like you to consider not taking that on yourselves, but having a larger pool of experience and people coming to the table to help you make decisions around cannabis and what happens here in our town, both planning, zoning, and license decision making. So there's that. And then I know that we also on the agenda have open container policy, and just want to make sure that it's stated that the more normalization that we do around controlled substances, the easier it becomes for our children to use, to drink, for that to be a normal activity for them. We don't have necessarily people talking to their kids on a regular basis. That's something that I definitely hope that we can start to do, is help parents have those conversations with their kids. But I worry that you're just giving me more job security by offering an open container policy to potentially change here in town. If we really think about what we're doing to let our kids know what's okay in public, what's okay at home, I ask you to really consider before making any big changes around the normalization of drug use, say nothing about alcohol use in public. Thank you.
Thanks, Emily. Just two things. So one, you're in favor of a local commission, but not necessarily one that's made up of a select board like we do for the liquor control.
Simply the select board. Yeah, I think that's putting a lot on you.
Yep.
I think there are a lot of nuances that are not as maybe known, first of all, right? Because a lot of things are changing pretty frequently and will continue to. I also think that it's a big ask, another thing for you all to be responsible for, and you might ultimately be responsible for it. But I'd ask that you think about really encouraging some other support when you make those decisions.
Okay, and the one other thing is just for the open container. I think tonight our discussion is whether the select board wants to authorize the town manager to actually come up and craft something. So I think, if that goes forward, I think there'll be a lot of discussion about the parameters of it. Just so stay tuned, I would say,
Great.
Yeah, Emily, if I may. So I'll admit I haven't done as much as I should on this. Do you have any idea as far as how other towns in the town of Hartford, other towns?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but so basically things relating to on the agenda shouldn't even be in public comment. So I think we should hold this conversation until we get to it. Like I didn't want to interrupt Emily or interrupt Mike, and I'm sorry for but this isn't the time for us to have the discussion. It's when we're like, Emily, really, we should have waited and interrupted you and had you come back to have this discussion when we get to it on the agenda. Sure. I mean, I'm happy to keep going if everyone else.
No, Kim, I support you on that. I do think that seems procedural.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the room like to comment, Paul?
An item's not on the agenda.
Anyone on Zoom?
No, no hands up.
Okay, thanks, everybody. That is public comment. Okay, Rocket, anything?
I also have a question of the town manager, but it's really generally about public citizens continuing to have difficulty getting information. So I just wanted to encourage the town manager taking on an already difficult task, but to continue to be responsive to citizens about their requests for public information. I went to the Bugby Senior Center today at the request of citizens last week or last meeting, 2 meetings prior, and they need doors. Oh my God, they need emergency, they need those ADA doors. And if there's a way for us as select board to figure out a solution to that, perhaps robbing Peter to pay Paul, finding a budget now that we fill with ARPA later, something like that. It doesn't seem right or just of us to continue to ask our senior citizens using that facility to be the doors. It's a pretty inaccessible situation. So I just wanted to share that with the board. For the community, I am honored to announce that I was appointed to serve on the Vermont Opioid Settlement Advisory Committee. So the VLCT, the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, chooses 7 public servants across the state to serve on this advisory committee. There's a $63 million settlement that is coming to the state of Vermont, that this advisory of 16 people, 7 of whom are elected officials, are going to serve, and trying to figure out ways that we might best distribute those funds. This is an extremely important issue to me because I have personally lost people and had people in my life affected by the opioid crisis, as I know many in our community have. So it is an immense honor for me to serve on that committee, but I also want to share that as a way of opening my ears to anyone in the community who has thoughts on that or have personal experiences that you would like to share. Those will be held in confidence. Yeah, so just that will be an ongoing process over the next, frankly, couple of years. I think it's a 4-year appointment. So, and then the last is just a comment on inflation and our town staff, which I know there's ongoing unions conversations, but been thinking a lot about the way that inflation just destroys purchasing power, not just for us as a town with ARPA, but also in terms of the way we pay wages. I'm personally a believer that all minimum wages should be pegged to some form of CPI. And I just wanted to state that publicly, that I want to be really supportive of our staff in not just the negotiations, but all staff, union or not, in terms of figuring out ways that we as a select board can find a means by which we can afford to pay our staff a living wage, which is that they get paid fairly for the work that they do, but also that salary, that wage increases annually pegged to CPI. Because if we don't increase their income or their salary, but their compensation, let's say by CPI, every year they are losing purchasing power in their service to our community. In a time where many of them can have job offers across the river and elsewhere for significantly more pay. A huge reason why I understand a lot of staff continue to work for Hartford is because they love our town. So it's a great honor to have their effort, but I think that we should try to work our way as a select board towards figuring out how we can afford it so that we are honoring our commitment to live in an equitable society where people are being paid justly for the work that they do and not having their lunch eaten by factors, global forces or national forces that are out of their control. Thank you.
Mary?
Yes. Thank you, Rocket. I just want to say that I agree with you about Bugby. I also took them up on their offer last week and really enjoyed the time that I spent with these people. And I also, I will be addressing it as a member of the Conservation Commission, the liaison. But there is an upcoming mountain bike race coming up that Parks and Recs sponsors, 10K, 5K on the 23rd of July. And I guess there's usually about 100 people who participate, and it will go through a majority of the town forest, but I guess people absolutely love this. So.
Dan? Yeah.
I just want to give a shout out to Department of Public Works for the downtown construction phase 2 project. I have seen them encounter some extremely challenging, a lot of stuff under the streets that have been there for a long time. And I've also seen them there after 6 p.m., after 7 p.m., some evenings to be able to get it closed up to be able to be used for traffic the next morning. And I just want to express my appreciation for all the work that they're doing down there.
Thanks, Kim. I have no comments, so we'll move on to appointments. Victoria Chase has withdrawn her name from consideration for an appointment to Resilient Hartford. So we can move on from there. Our next item is the town manager's report. We don't have a town manager this evening. So if anyone wants to mention anything they saw in the report they'd like to share with folks, that's fine. We're still working on upgrading our website, and that remains a work in progress, but it's worth checking out. Wayne?
Question, did anybody, I did not, anybody get a chance to go to the opening of the pool?
I did.
They did. Was there a pretty good crowd there for that? Okay. I'm glad there was representation.
Yeah, I've heard nothing but good stuff about the
Yeah.
pool.
Good, good.
Really, people love it, so
Good.
that's great.
Thank you.
Did either of you swim?
Oh, I didn't go to swim, but
No cannonballs?
no, there were
There
too
wasn't
many.
room in the pool.
Yeah, I was gonna say, there's so many kids there. It was great to see them and plenty of people that enjoyed it. I should have
And
said something. I totally.
Your impressions of the pool then, or
Oh, everything's great.
and yourself, Dan?
It was really spectacular. There's a lot of features there. State of the art. People loved it of all ages. You know, there were kids, there were families, there were senior citizens. Everyone seemed to have a good time.
Very good. Yeah, thank you. Thank you both for your input.
Okay, so we'll move on to board reports, motions, and ordinances. Our first item is the HCOREI charge update. Want to come up?
Hi, I'm
Hi.
Marion Wood, a member of HCOREI.
I'm Molly Armas, and I'm official now.
So an important part of HCOREI is the commitment to social equity and justice with the Hartford School District, and that includes the student body. HCOREI is requesting to have 2 student liaisons. There's currently 1. So the change would be to have 2 student liaisons. One is a senior, one is a student in a different grade. And that would, because what's happening is the senior is just there for 1 year, and so they come and they go. So that way we'd have someone stay a little bit longer. We'd also like them to be able to vote and have the same weight as other members. The other difference as well is that they would apply through the district equity coordinator, who's currently Maggie Abraham, and it wouldn't be through the select board of the school district has been in the past. And did I leave anything out? No, that seems right.
Are there any questions or discussion? It looks like we have a charge of the highlighted stuff. So it would go to 11 members because that's adding, right, 2 high school student liaisons.
Correct.
And then they would be, if they're interested, they apply through the district equity coordinator.
Yes, HCOREI would still interview, but the application.
Okay. Kim, do you have a comment or question?
Oh, I think it did get addressed here. So I think because a question had come up about some students at Hartford High School tuition in from other towns. And so would they be eligible? And I think that they, oh wait, I'm looking at one member of HCOREI may reside. So there isn't any bless you, reference to whether or not the student liaison has to be a Hartford resident, and we can assume that. Like, am I missing anything that's in there about that? Or does any?
I understand your question. I don't think so. I think it states that there can still be 1 member of HCOREI that can reside, well, from out of Hartford.
Right, but only 1. So if there's a community member, committee member, and then also a tuitioned Hartford student that lives in another town. I'm just wondering if it would make sense to, I guess if it's not mentioned, it doesn't have to be a factor. Does anyone else have thoughts on that? Like, I would like to not exclude tuition students and or potentially even homeschool students or.
Yeah, I read high school student to be anyone who's enrolled in the school, regardless of where they come from.
I think the intent certainly isn't to exclude any students that, pay and live out of district. We certainly don't want to exclude anyone.
Kim, to your point, it may be helpful to clarify 2 Hartford High School students. And then the next sentence, 1 member of HCOREI notwithstanding the students may reside outside of Hartford, just sort of to give that exemption. Just specificity.
I think that would be fun.
Okay, and then I do have a question. So I went to a high school that was very encouraging of high school students being involved with things like this. So I think this is wonderful. But two questions I have is I wanted to hear a little bit of your rationale of why but the committee's rationale of adding high school students. Explain a little further, and then also maybe the rationale of having student liaisons be chosen through the district equity coordinator rather than through the select board if they're being asked to serve on the same committee.
So I think the voice of the student body is very important to HCOREI. Molly's brought just a wealth to the committee, and she's there on the floors and a student in the school. The rest of us are adults, and so I think she has a different perspective. Or whoever that high school liaison is, they have a different perspective, and they have other things to bring to the table.
Yeah, I would also just say, like, I'm involved in equity work within the high school as well, and so I think having some communication between the town and the high school is really helpful. It's both sides of it.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And then as far as the process of how they're chosen.
I think to kind of piggyback off of what she just said, because she is involved, or the other student liaisons were likely involved in their school, that we found that it would just make sense to go through Maggie. I don't.
So the district equity coordinator, is that someone who is like in the school system?
Exactly.
Okay,
yes.
because they interview through, or they apply
They
to that
apply.
person who's available to them. HCOREI interviews applicants and advises us and the school board on vacancies. Is that the same way
Exactly.
it's going to be? Okay, so it's more like it's easier to apply through this person who's there than to track one of us down.
I think it makes more sense.
Okay.
There's the relationships already there. I think
Yeah.
we probably worked on different projects, with this director.
Would they be finally approved by the select board or just simply through the district equity coordinator? My point
We have
is that
approval on all
is that a
applicants,
step
don't we?
in the process?
Well, it wouldn't be approved by the district, by the coordinator, because she would be taking the applications. HCOREI would still be doing the interviews. So ultimately, I think it would be HCOREI deciding,
For HCOREI recommending to
or
us.
recommending.
I think we
Yeah.
ultimately
It's
decide who goes on it.
bullet
Yep.
number 4 says, so it goes in order. So basically, the community members apply through the regular town committee application process. Student liaisons would apply through the district equity coordinator. HCOREI would interview all applicants and advise the school board and select board on vacancies the committee has vacancies. And then number 4 says the select board and school board will ratify or reject a vote, not worded correctly, a vote for each new appointment to HCOREI. So I think ultimately we still would have to approve each member.
So then doesn't this add an extra step for students that want to participate?
Yeah.
Doesn't that make it more?
It's just,
Like,
I think it's it's a resource, right? So it's basically the district equity coordinator might say, oh, hey, there's an opening for a student liaison on HCOREI,
Right.
and could go through the process that way. I mean, I think it's just like where,
I think it's a little friendlier for the high school students. I mean, they're dealing with someone that's in their school who they've already kind of built a relationship with as
Okay.
kind of their first contact, or perhaps the person that approaches them about this kind
I
of
see.
thing.
Yeah, I don't necessarily see an extra step. I just see, because members who want to be on have to go through the town committee application process, and the students just go there. Equity coordinator are interested, and then it gets vetted and passed on to us.
And then they would still have to come in.
Yeah, they all have to come through
Right, so
us.
that to me feels, I mean, if that makes it more comfortable, that's fine. I mean, to me, it felt almost like adding a prohibitive step because you now have to apply to this person, then to this, then come in.
Well, and I also think
But that's okay, I
I
mean-
keep using Molly as an example,
Yeah.
but this is a process that she thinks would be great for the student body.
Okay.
And again, these are, they're high schoolers, so if they're having a
Sure.
little bit of a different process than us adults, and it's more comfortable for them, I think that's okay.
Well, great. And Molly, I commend you for coming in and participating in local government. It's pretty cool.
She's pretty wonderful.
Thank you. I believe Molly's my neighbor.
Oh.
Yeah. It's good to see you here. Lanny?
Yeah, I have a concern about the application process to this. And my concern is that in terms of equity inclusion across the board for the HCOREI, there seems to be a different standard of application for students than there are to people that come before this board. And I just feel that there's a lot more scrutiny that's happening on the select board level and less on the student level. And if that is the case, whether we can perhaps mold the application process for the select board decision making. I'm not sure if the applicant will have to apply to this person, then make out a separate application to us. But I would question what the application would look like, whether it's a questionnaire, whether it's something else that
I don't
has.
believe the
that.
application would be any different.
Well, we have an application that lists a whole lot of different
No,
things
they would still
for our
come in.
committees.
They would still
I
come in.
know, but listen to me, what I'm saying, though, okay? If they're saying the applicant will be, go before, I'm sorry, this person is the title.
Maggie,
And what's her title again?
she's the social.
District.
Okay, so, and that's fine, okay? But if they put in an application to that person, that's going, do they again have to put in an application that we use for our boards? It just makes it extremely complicated for a student, and and it's not the same process that an adult would come to the town with. And we have to have the same type of application process across the board as far as equality. And that's not, I'm not seeing that take place here. And if we have to lower the standards of our application process, that's fine. But I don't want to have to put a student through applications of the school and then have to have them come to our town and have the application process. And I don't want to have to lower our standards for citizens to come to us and ask for a place on this. So there's got to be a happy medium that we can meet for the application process to be the same. That's what equity is all about. That's what this committee is all about.
Now I'm confused.
Kim?
I think it would be very manageable to provide the district equity coordinator with copies of or the digital access to our application form so that students could apply using that same application. And if the equity director coordinator felt that it was warranted to move it forward, then they would basically send their application off to HCOREI, so that there really only needs to be one application completed by the student.
The difference is essentially when be coming to the select board.
But what I'm concerned about in this is that I, as a select board member, because I'm not part of the HCOREI, do not know what it is that makes up a great person to have on the HCOREI, okay? And I would like to see that process. I mean, I'm sure that this Maggie has all the skills in the world to be able to identify that perfect person, okay? But I don't have that. And if I see something that comes across on this application the town has that doesn't allow this student to shine, that's not fair to that student.
I don't think it's all that
too much
different if you-
emphasis is being put on Maggie. I mean, she's just,
She just
Taking
takes the application,
applications,
same application that
word
the
of
member
mouth,
would get.
Molly could have told someone that's gonna be a senior next year, hey, HCOREI would be great for you. It's not that necessarily Maggie's there to just recruit people. It's just,
I'm all
just
for
understand.
this person. I'd really like to have some equity in the way that the application process takes place.
As
And
far
I
as
think
I can tell based on this, if you're a member of the community, you fill out our standard application form and you give it to the basically the town committee application process. If you're a student, you fill out the same application and you give it to your district equity coordinator because they're there and you're more comfortable with them. Both applications get sent to HCOREI. As part of their charge, they interview applicants and advise us and the school board, and then we get to take a look at it with the application like we do for anyone to a town committee. It's the same application. It's not asking something different. It's just allowing the students a different opportunity to get it to us, is the way that I understand it. So it
Will
looks
you-
fairly equal to me.
Will you take the town's application and have that go to Maggie?
I don't
for-
see why not. I don't think we've specifically discussed that, but I mean, I do agree it should be the same application,
Yeah, it's
same
gotta be-
questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think-
There isn't a reason to have
no,
a different application.
that's the whole point of this board is to have
Yeah.
that.
Well, Lynn, at the end of it, they still have to come through the select board and be approved, right? So
Just the
it's up
start
to
of the
them to make up
process.
two applications or use the same application. It's probably in the incentive to use the one that we already use. But the district equity coordinator would be the one facilitating the collection of applications from high school students as a friendly face and a person on site to kind of.
And just a little helper for
Cool.
the younger.
Two things in our packet this evening. There is an application. In the quick review of this, this seems perfectly applicable for a high school student to fill out. And there is places for references. So if they don't shine on the application, we'll follow up with the references and figure that out. I do want to point that this is in line with the DEI strategic plan, number 10, about including students in the process. So I think that's a good step in the right direction. So thank you for making that happen.
Thank you.
Sure. Final comment. I say this every time with HCOREI. We need to find ways to look out for the poor white people in our community. I say this as a person of color. I think the best way to build empathy is to show empathy. And I think that it is wonderful that we as people of color do have increased voice and protection, but also just to make sure that that is included in the charge and mission. So thank you for what you do and appreciate it.
I have one more comment as well. I know Russell wants to speak, and then I'll be happy to make a motion with some minor amendments to the.
Absolutely.
Would you like us to sit now?
If you want, sure. I mean, I just wanted to, we can talk about this further offline as well. There was a lot of discussion around the origin of the Hartford Committee on Racial Equity and Inclusion.
Right.
That it would be primarily focused on racial equity, and it was not going to be a catch-all for the, you know, many protected classes or marginalized groups or socioeconomic. I mean, that's a lot, and there is a lot of work to be done there, but this committee's focus was particularly focused on racial equity as by design.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that, and I appreciate that. I would just say, speaking from my own personal experience, I have found that people have warmed to me as a person more when I have taken interest in concern in their lives. And I get, these are not clearly defined boundaries of where one's mission starts and the next one ends. But I do think that from lived personal experiences, oftentimes in rural white communities, that making sure that people understand that we are, I'm not just in this for myself and hey, rah, rah, look at me and my identity, but also that your compassion, your concerns are also mine. And so I think that in the interest of racial equity, that it is important for people of color in our community to step up and to say that we do care about ourselves, but we also care about the well-being of those around us. And so that there is this mutual concern that a rising tide lifts all boats. So I do get it. And it is, I can understand where what I'm saying can be perceived as a bit of mission creep, but I do think of it as one and the same, which is that if I were to only go ahead and look out for myself or the Asian American or the Asian members of our community, I think that people would be probably, my feeling is that people on an emotional level would be less inclined to be excited about that, as if just they were to say, well, he really cares about all of us. So why don't we also, in receiving that compassion, also lend compassion? So
Let's talk further.
Absolutely.
Another
And
time.
Russ, did you have something to add if you're done, Kim?
Russ North, White River Junction, member of the school board, member of HCOREI, and a member of HCC.
Wow.
So in answering some of these questions, because I was the one who initially put this proposal forward, and I've learned so much from people like Molly who've helped educate me on where I'm deficient. And part of my thought was they contribute so much that then even to have a greater stake in the process. And since it's an advisory committee, it doesn't run afoul of any public rules regarding elected officials. As some of you may be aware, the school board has 2 student representatives, and the process that's being discussed is very similar to the way those students are chosen. And part of the thing about having it go through the equity coordinator is that person will be able to judge the commitment, because let's face it, when we're young, we like to say we're going to do things and we don't always do it. At least I didn't. So that was part of the process. And some of the procedural matters I'll get into, because this was discussed at the school board. And some of the procedural matters on the application we think needs some refinement. And again, I'm speaking as an individual member of the school board and not authorized to speak for the group. So the application process was designed since Maggie, the administration, will have a better idea about the overall student and their traits. So that was part of the reason, that was the first part of it. Whether we use the standard town application, I don't think that would be a problem type thing. Then it would go to HCOREI for their recommendation to both boards, and it would have to be approved by both boards type thing. In the school board meeting of the 28th, there was some concern expressed about exposure of the student representative to criticism from members of the public. Because unfortunately, some of this can be controversial and not everyone has the same opinions. One of the things that were discussed is, one, members of HCOREI could also help the student representative if we thought it was going to be a particularly difficult situation, and allow them to recuse themselves from the vote. But then I brought up the point, but generally the younger generation is less worried about public comment or opinion type thing, and they're willing to express themselves. So the school board has some procedural tweaks it would like to see to the charter change. In substance, while we didn't approve it, we did like the concept and say it should go forward.
Thank you, Russ.
So would it make sense that if we have a vote on this tonight, maybe with these minor edits that we just suggested, then it still needs to go back to the school board again?
Yes, I think that would be appropriate,
Yeah.
with the understanding that unless we came up with a major change, and you'd have to trust us, that then we could go forward type thing. Because in substance, I think we're all in agreement. I mean, there are wording, but again, if you read something closely enough, you can always find something where the wording you don't like.
Would it make sense to even incorporate that in a motion, like subject to minor modifications as approved by the school?
I would leave that up to you as the governing body here, whether you judge that to be appropriate. I don't see a problem with it.
Was HCOREI originally adopted by both school board and select board? Okay,
Yeah.
so there is a role for it. Yeah, I don't really have
I
any.
mean, if anything, we might need to just come back for a quick vote if there's.
Yeah.
edit.
I mean, I was thinking, if we pass this, the charter change with whatever small amendments that you're gonna propose in your motion, and the school board look, and, I mean, eventually we can get to the same thing. I think if they have some minor, changes they'd like to make, and that's a quick vote. I mean, substantively, this is the, the important motion here, I think.
Can I ask one more question?
Of course.
Russ, did you have any thoughts around that question I raised about the residency of the student liaison?
I hadn't thought about it till you raised it, but I think it should be open to all students at Hartford High School,
Yeah.
because they're attending school here, so it affects them as well.
Okay.
And I think it could be tweaked, since again, you could say, make an exception for the student representatives and still retain the one outside community member.
Ready for a motion?
I'm ready for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that the select board approve the revised charge of the Hartford Committee on Racial Equity and Inclusion with 2 minor amendments. In the Constitution, to change the wording from 2 high school student liaisons to 2 Hartford High School student liaisons. And in bullet number 4, change to the select board and school board will ratify or reject by a vote for each new appointment to HCOREI. I have it written down.
A second.
Did you want to make a modification to add like a out of a non-resident student qualification?
Didn't you just say that?
I just said the Hartford High School student liaison.
Oh, yeah, but that last sentence, one member of HCOREI may reside outside of Hartford.
Okay, so
Notwithstanding the
one
students,
more
or-
modification. I'll write this down too. I'll share this again. And to change the sentence, one member of HCOREI may reside outside of Hartford, and student liaisons
Notwithstanding the 2 student liaisons.
notwithstanding 2 student liaisons. We'll go back.
That way, there's a residency exemption for those 2 students, right?
Yeah, that Works for me. That's what they call, what do they call it?
If friendly amendment.
Yeah,
Thank you, accepted.
boots and suspenders,
Okay.
or belt and suspenders. That's how we did it when we were drafting legislation. All right, so we've got a motion on the floor.
Yes, okay. Dan seconded.
We have a second from Dan. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, looks like it carries unanimously. Thanks, everybody. All right, our next item is the review of the DEI strategic plan and implementation steps. I think if you look in the packet, a lot of this was, there were 11 items, and then Tracy, I think, sort of responded as the town manager on sort of the process on some of this. So I don't know without her how we want to address this, if people want to have anything they'd like to discuss about this, or if it's just something we kind of need to wait till Tracy's back to really dig into. So, I mean, if anyone has comments about it, please come up. Otherwise, I think we'll probably move on to the next item. Okay. Not really seeing anybody. So, all right, we will take that up. Next, we should probably just, maybe table this till the next meeting, because I think it is important to discuss. So, Kim?
Well, and, I guess, yeah, and we'll be getting some diversity and equity training on the books very soon, which I'll be coming at you with some date possibilities pretty soon. And
Awesome.
proposals, so.
Yeah, I think we're all looking forward to that. Okay, so we'll table that one. The next is the Energy Commission charge. We're making incredible time here. They're not actually scheduled till 7:45. I don't know if Molly Smith is on Zoom.
I don't see them.
It's one we can skip until we get closer to the time that it is scheduled for.
We could bring up those, I know they've already changed the order of agenda, but we could bring the consent agenda items up.
I think that would
Yeah,
make some
yeah.
sense. What do you think about that? All right, well, then what we'll do for now is.
How do we do that? Can do we table it? And then,
Well, I think we're gonna, I don't know, do we just skip the Energy Commission charge until one of the representatives comes up, and instead we'll
I'm
take
not,
up
I'm
these
not sure
two?
under Robert's rules, what's
two
the proper
agenda
procedure
items.
to do that's. If
Well,
there's,
we already,
We can always vote on it, can't we?
well, we had changes to the agenda at the beginning of the meetings. That's why I'm asking how do we go about it in a legitimate open meeting format? I don't know.
Kim?
I mean, I think that because we already, like the published agenda had those items in the consent agenda. So I think we asked to make a change to that. And so basically what we're considering now is just pulling those up to a different spot. Like the two things that we're talking about slipping in now, because we're ahead of schedule, are the things that were in the consent agenda. So we're not making any change other than what we already did based on what was the published agenda.
I think we've agreed to remove those two from the consent agenda to take up. I just put them after the proposed ordinance change because it was sort of the end of our agenda. But since we've made such time, I don't really see any issue with us taking it up early. If you feel better if we had a vote on it.
No, I'll go at the pleasure of the board. I just want to make sure that according to what we're supposed to be doing, whether we're following the procedure of Robert's
I mean,
rules.
when we pulled them out and voted to, they could have basically gone anywhere. I just happened to put them there.
That's fine. We'll go
Based on the time. So I think it would make some sense if we did take those up since we're waiting.
I'm fine with that.
All right, so the first one is the contract for Namely. And again, this may be one we need to call on someone to help us with. The agenda memorandum, that item is page 42 out of 63. And this is the one where basically IT and HR are they're entering into a contract with Namely as a software vendor that does a bunch of things like, tracking, compliance reporting, forms, things like that. And Kim, I think you wanted to bring this one out. Is there any questions you had about it specifically that?
Yeah, and I
you wanna
guess,
discuss?
I just really wanted to, I'm not opposed to it. Like, I'm actually quite supportive of this kind of platform application to be used in, I think that many departments within the town could benefit from some of this efficiency in using, whether it's work plans or project implementation plans or those kind of things. I think there's a lot of tools out there that we don't necessarily take advantage of. So I'm supportive of this. I guess I just wanted to hear a little more substance behind how it justified actually replacing benefits technician. And I guess also I was feeling a little ambiguous around, I thought that benefits technician was not just HR, that there was some overlay between public works, and maybe I'm conflating the different positions that we all discussed. I actually reached out to the company and they were able to send me a copy of the demo that they did with the HR director. And I just haven't had, it's like an hour-long demo and I haven't had an opportunity to watch the whole thing. So I guess I was just feeling like it needed a little more attention and I needed a little more reassurance of why this meant, I mean, yeah, I'm not suggesting that I'm opposed to replacing a position with this software, but I wanted a little more substance.
Yeah, understood. I don't know. I think the problem is I don't know that we have to, when you try to give us more substance. I'm not aware of this being time sensitive. I think any of these can be tabled if we need to.
And I would be interested to hear from HR about why this would like to be kind of substantiated by the HR director, who, you know, any of our departments, and including IT, who was, you know, anticipated in the 23 budget to get an assistant as well. But I mean, any department that's a one-person department in a town with over 110 employees, particularly, I think is challenging. And there are other reasons for that, because, you know, basically HR is the pathway to which any employee has to be able to sort of express concerns or whatever through the town. So I just think it's worth a little more exploration.
Yeah, man.
I guess I'm lost on one thing you said, in that I don't see this as replacing the benefits technician. Where does that state that it will
Financial impact. Equalized over approximately 3 years, then anticipated savings, namely one-time implementation costs are $4,000. The annual subscription cost guaranteed within 4% for subsequent years is $19,800. The benefits technician salary, workers' compensation, and FICA totaled $21,068.
Okay, so we're going to totally wipe out a person and replace it with software.
Well,
I
that's
find
a position that hasn't been filled yet, that is budgeted for the 23.
So, okay, so first off, I've got to ask this question that was asked in the past many times. How did we ever get along without this? That'd be the first thing I would have to ask. And is there any other software out there that someone has looked out upon for possible solutions here? I really question how it is we've managed to go for as long as we have as a town of Hartford and not had a software in the year 2022. And whether we have that many more documents that we have to keep track of, or whether it's, I'd like some explanation of how it is we did it in the past for the first thing. That would be my first question.
I mean, I would say I think there are many, many opportunities in the town to modernize the systems that we use. And this might be one. Like, I think this could be a really valuable tool for human resources and for the employees as well. Like, just at a glance, it has where employees can use it to request time off, to check their, available paid sick leave, to report in on educational courses and things that they're taking, to there's a whole resource department for different, policies and that kind of thing. I think, and I would guess that both HR and IT did research multiple programs. I can't obviously speak to that because we can't ask them right now, but yeah.
I sort of feel like tonight, unless like,
We're lost.
unless HR and IT just like waltz in here, like we're not gonna get the answers we need. So I don't really have any problem with this one being tabled, because I do think you raised some good questions. I was sort of unclear, does this mean like we're doing this in lieu of that
Yeah, I don't
position?
get that.
And so if there's support with the board, I'd say we just table this one until we get answers. It's like next week.
Yeah,
And
without,
it may unfortunately be the same for the next item we look at. Just because we don't really have, we've got questions and we're not.
without having our
Yeah.
professionals here,
Yeah.
I can't see it.
So everyone okay if we table this till the next meeting? All right, so the next one though is also that is the Clean Water State Revolving Fund Loan Amendment. And I did notice, and I saw that too with Lanny with the ARPA, and I was wondering whether,
I
are we
guess,
spending ARPA funds here, or the
Yeah.
fact that we have them allow us to do something? And so I think that was kind of my question.
Yeah,
coming
I questioned
into
that.
it.
I also question, I mean, I would like to have Chris here to
Yeah.
be able to ask him, and I'm not sure if he was planning on being here at a later time tonight. Do you know, Lana? Yeah, without the town manager here to facilitate this, I don't think we can carry forth on this.
Okay. I'm open to, I think we're all
I
okay.
make a
with
motion to table.
Tabling.
Do we have
this.
to, do we make a motion to table, or can we just table it?
I think we can just
Yeah.
table it. With the caveat, if like Paula or Dylan or Chris showed up, we could have them talk about it, right? But like for now, I think there's just not, we just have questions.
Okay, sailing right along.
Yeah, we're totally sailing right along. So we still are waiting for the Energy Commission charge update. I emailed Molly to see if she could hop on Zoom, but I don't know.
Break sounds good.
You want to pose to a break for 10 minutes, or do you want to? Because I know the Cannabis Control Commission, I think Emily wanted to speak on. And I don't see her
She's out in the hallways.
right here.
Take a break.
Anybody opposed to it? I mean,
Take a break.
I'm open to going through open container, but do we want to wait as well for?
yeah, let's take a break. We're like,
Okay.
this is just odd because we're so far ahead in schedule,
Skip
Let's take a 10-minute
I
break.
don't know what to do.
No, I know. I hear you. I say we take a break. And those items we need more info, we'll. Oh yeah, we can sign our paper.
I can just have the PDF up. It's not like PowerPoint or anything. But
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, CATV, we're good? Okay, we are back from our break, and our next item will be an Energy Commission charge update. And we have Molly Smith, Chair of the Energy Commission, by Zoom, I believe. You can bring Molly over, that'd be great.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me all okay?
And hi, Molly.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us early, of all things.
Of course.
And if you want to just tell us, what we're looking at tonight, the change to the charge, and just give us some background on what it's intended to do, that would be great.
Absolutely. So I am here tonight to ask for the Select Board's approval to change our bylaws to, one, allow a minority of non-residents with an interest in Hartford and/or energy issues to participate on the Hartford Energy Commission as full members. Before I go into the specifics as to why we are asking for this change, I want to clarify a few things. First, we stipulate very clearly in the copy of the bylaws that I believe you all have that the majority members of our 7-member commission will always be Hartford residents, and Hartford residents will always be given priority in any application process when we have vacancies. Secondly, we will only recommend non-resident candidates for the commission who either have a business or vested interest in the town of Hartford or are a student studying energy, sustainability, or climate-related topics. Basically, individuals who are somehow connected to the town or to our work. We will not be recommending individuals who are non-residents who have no connection to Hartford or lack experience in energy or energy-related issues. And finally, we are asking for full membership instead of just volunteer status for non-residents, as full commission members are more likely to participate on a regular basis in commission meetings, as the formal title imparts a greater responsibility in terms of attendance and participation. And we are asking for this change in our bylaws due to really low membership numbers over the past 3 years, due to a variety of factors, including the COVID-19 pandemic. We went from being a 7-member commission with a variety of volunteers to just 3 members and no volunteers. And despite our best recruitment efforts, both in person and on the town listservs, we were unable to fill these vacancies. And as a result, we went without quorum for nearly a year. This was really detrimental to our work, as we needed quorum to make not only major decisions, but also little ones like approving minutes. It also was damaging, as it resulted in the members we did have suffering from burnout as a result of being overburdened with work. During this time period, we did have interest in people who wanted to join the commission, especially from Vermont Law School and some Dartmouth students who wanted to participate as full commission members, but we couldn't offer them a spot due to our bylaws prohibiting non-resident participants. We did offer them volunteer participation, but as I mentioned a bit earlier, it's not quite as attractive, and the obligations aren't as strict, so often they would sort of drift off. We understand that by opening up the commission to allowing non-resident students to participate, it's unlikely that they'd be able to see out a full 3-year term. However, we firmly believe that the benefits of having student participation outweighs their often limited timelines of availability. And should this change be approved, opportunities to fill vacant seats would be a lot easier. Finally, I just want to say that by allowing students, especially from Dartmouth, from Vermont Law School, to participate, it also really benefits them, gives them a taste of what it's like to really work in town government, town politics, and really shape the future that we're working on here in Hartford. So that's the basics of that major change in our bylaws. The other change would be that it would just stipulate that the town representative from the town of Hartford on the commission would be I believe the language is a municipal employee. I think previously it was planning commission, but we'd like to change it to municipal employee, so that can include our current liaison, Dana Clausen. I'm now happy to take any questions.
Any questions from all? Kim?
Maybe, I don't know if this is a question for the chair or for Molly, but what's the difference between being a bylaw and a charge?
I'm not sure that question would be for me because I do not know.
Like, does the commission, is it maybe the difference between a commission and a committee?
It's entirely possible.
We have the authority to make this modification without it being like a charter change or anything, right?
Right.
Nothing in the charter for this.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is, I don't know if it's, we call some of them charges, we call some bylaws. I don't know if there's a distinction really other than just what we call them at the time. I mean, we created this commission, right? I mean, I think we can make amendments to its bylaws.
Okay, and then the only other thing I think I was going to request is that when a document like this is modified, so Molly, if the select board approves the modification, that we always add an amended date at the bottom of the document, so we know when it was last updated. So that's just a request for any document like this that I would put forth. Otherwise, I'm comfortable with this request.
Any other questions for me?
I don't have it from Molly, but I have discussion for the board.
Okay.
So I don't know if anybody else has anything for Molly first.
Doesn't look like it. I think.
So I've been thinking a lot about participation in boards and committees within the town of Hartford. And there seems to be, in this day and age that we're in, a lack of civic participation across the country for things of this nature. But I have to ask the question of, do we want to continue committees when we don't have the people within the town itself to have a level of commitment to staff them? Because it's in the best interest of the town to have these committees, but it's also, if there's enough citizens of the general public to have the same interests joined together, that makes a committee within the town. And if we don't have enough enthusiasm for something of this nature, is this a committee that we should sunset, or should we and put it in the hands of our energy coordinator? No one wants to see something go away, but if there's not the level of enthusiasm in the town to staff this, that's why fraternal organizations nationwide have fallen into disrepair and not prospered, because the lack of enthusiasm of members to carry out the duties of them. And the goals of the Energy Commission can still be carried on through our energy coordinator that we have. And I think it's important for us to keep that position. But we really have to ask ourselves is that, do we really want to start filling our boards and our commissions, the committees, with people outside the town of Hartford if there's not enough interest within the town to staff them? If there's not enough interest in the town to staff them, then we don't need them. I mean, it's just no, I mean, if you can't get enough people in the town of Hartford to staff a committee of 5 or 7, I mean, that's a very low number.
But Lanny, respectfully, that logic doesn't sit easy. You know, we have a staffing shortage in a lot of our departments. That doesn't mean we don't need them.
No, what I'm saying is we hire people for town staff to get paid. What I'm saying is for volunteerism in the town of Hartford. If you can't get enough volunteers within the town of Hartford to have enough passion, I mean, the HCOREI is a great example. You have a lot of passion and a lot of enthusiasm for that committee, and you have people come out in droves for that. They want to be part of that because it's important to them. If there's not enough importance to people within the town of Hartford, so some of our, I don't want to say lesser committees, what is the reason for us continuing them on and staffing them with people from outside of the town of Hartford that do not have, I'm not saying they don't have the best interests of Hartford in play, but they don't have the full interest of Hartford because they're not citizens of Hartford and they're not voting members of Hartford. It's hard to explain, but.
May I make a clarifying point, please?
Yeah.
So we currently do have quorum. We currently have 5 full-time commission members. So we are able to conduct business, and we are really happy about that. This process of potentially seeking outside the town participants started sort of in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I truly do blame the pandemic for our loss of membership. I think people were burned out. People had a lot of Zoom fatigue. We are doing a lot better. And I see this less as diminished interest in the committee and more an opportunity to allow people who perhaps don't live in the town but have interests here to participate. I do believe that as things begin to recover from the pandemic and economically, that we would be able to fill the remaining 2 seats. This is mostly a preventative measure. God forbid we do have future pandemics, but it's mostly a fail-safe so that we do not reach a situation again where we are unable to conduct business due to lack of quorum.
Yeah, I do appreciate that, Molly, and I appreciate the planning for the future, but I still have to go back and ask if there's a level of commitment, and obviously you do have a strong level of commitment, and I appreciate your level of commitment to this. But if there's not enough level of commitment of other individuals like yourself within the town of Hartford to have this committee of citizenry of over 10,000 people, to have 7 people on the committee, is there, for lack of a better term, I don't want this to come across in a harmful way, but is there a reason to continue this if there's not the interest in the committee? When we have a resource such as the energy coordinator to take care of the energy needs within the town of Hartford, it's something we have to honestly think about
Lanny,
as board members.
if I can just jump in, because I think this is, I think clearly there are 5 members now, so there is interest, and I hear that this is being presented as a preventative measure. I will say that the qualifications of being expanded qualifications of just having an interest in Hartford or having relevant topical experience feels pretty broad to me, because you could have, I don't know, an energy expert in New Mexico by that parameter. I'm not saying that they would or whatever. It just feels broad to me. I do think, I mean, as a Vermont law student, I do think it would be great to be able to have the contributions of other minds. Same time, Lanny, I agree. I mean, we have a population of 10,000 people. Surely we can drum up the interest for this. And there is the active interest is what we're here. So I'm open to the idea of having more minds personally. I wonder though if the parameters are a little bit broad for my comfort, because at the end of the day, it is the Hartford Energy Commission and they are here to advise and serve our town. So I think having stakes in our community, whether as a resident or as a business owner or an employee of a business in town, that to me is probably a pretty important parameter.
One thing that is here that I think is important is that a majority of the commission members have to be residents. And as Molly said, Hartford residents would be prioritized to be members of the committee. We are stone's throw from, the Thayer School of Engineering, Dartmouth College, the Irving Institute. Like there may be a lot of people who are here for 4 years, 3 or 4 years, who have some interest in this particular thing. It could bring, quite a lot of knowledge, as long as the priority remains, that this is a majority resident committee. I think that's something to think about. Kim?
I agree with you. And regardless, each individual applicant would still need to be approved by the select board as a whole. So if there were criteria that we didn't think that they met, that could be addressed during individual application process. And I think another kind of converse thing to what you're saying, if there's not enough interest there, I mean, I think another area where there's a lot of room for improvement, as we know, in the town of Hartford, is communications, right? So I think there's opportunities, like whether or not if we end up with a public information officer or I'm cautiously optimistic about how our new website is coming forth. I'm still not impressed with it yet, but there might, I think that when there is bandwidth, there might be better opportunity to promote the opportunities within the commissions and the committees of the town in a more robust way. And And I mean, just like with HR and IT, our energy coordinator is a one-person department, and they cannot handle all of the energy needs of the town of Hartford, in my opinion. So anyway, I'm perfectly comfortable with this proposal. Molly has their hand back up again.
Oh, great.
Molly?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to address two comments. One, Rocket mentioned that, what are the possibility of somebody with an energy interest in Hartford, but lived in New Mexico. When the commission came up with this proposal for the change, we were envisioning that it would be limited to, again, people with either a business in Hartford or some other very close connection to the town, or a student from a nearby academic institution such as Dartmouth, VLS, even a Hartford High School. I note that we do not have anything in our bylaws that prevents teenagers, high school students from participating. So, and as Kim said, the select board also would be approving individuals, and I can guarantee we would not send any individual to you all for approval that we did not ourselves feel would be a good fit and had Hartford's best interest and would be a good member. Also, to Kim's comment, I completely agree that we have had issues recruiting because a lot of people are under the misconception that on the Energy Commission, we deal with transformers and power lines and things like that. I myself have been working by using our newsletter and other public outreach efforts to dispel that misconception and tie it a lot more into climate issues. There had been discussion just in the commission a couple of years ago about maybe even changing the name to be something like energy and environment or energy and climate, but given we are tasked primarily with energy, we decided to stick with that name. But I would be really interested in talking more about ways that we can advertise what we do on the commission more, make it more approachable, and better communicate our work here.
Thank you, Molly. More discussion? I'll want to make a motion. Any more questions for Molly?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Roger.
Molly, would you be, so is, what I'm hearing is it's sort of not an either or qualification, it's a both and, having some relevant experience with energy as well as, and having a relevant connection to Hartford?
Not necessarily. In fact, we have one individual who is a resident of Hartford who just joined the committee who has absolutely zero energy experience, but is interested in being involved with the town. So I think it would be, again, because we are the Energy Commission, we don't usually have people reaching out to us and saying, hey, I want to be involved. It's usually through networking, through our own outreach that we talk to people. So again, these would be people that we have spoken to ahead of time and would recommend that they either be a volunteer or they be a full commission member.
Thank you. No? Kim?
Go ahead.
That was one recommendation. So,
Are you making a motion now?
yeah,
She's,
Okay.
unless if you want more comment.
Yeah, I just want to comment that I understand that you're going to go forward with this, and I'm not opposed to that. I'm going to vote no on this because I think that we should definitely work towards having committees that are filled with Hartford residents. And again, if we cannot get the participation from Hartford residents, enough care in the town and concern to step up and be part of the cause, we as the select board need to carefully consider either sunsetting the commission or putting it onto our town staff and adding more staff to carry the load. I mean, again, this is why the makeup of New England used to be made up of churches, and churches provided all the services that individuals within the town needed. But now you have all the social service agencies that provide those needs, and those social service agencies are paid to carry out those needs. And if the needs, because you couldn't get enough participation from the churches. So if we can't get enough participation from the members of the town, we need to think about adding staff to carry on that cost. So yes, our energy commission coordinator may not have the ability to do that. And if that's true, and we cannot get enough participation from members of the town of Hartford, we should add it. We should look at adding part-time staff to help with that goal. So I'm going to vote no on this.
Okay.
I too will be voting against this, but for very different reasons. I think that this commission sounds great and important. It seems like there's enough. In fact, I guess for me, I don't feel the pressing need to open this. And I feel slightly uncomfortable with just the open-ended nature of those parameters. It's just a little too broad for me, where I just wonder what precedent that sets for other commissions and committees. And I'm not opposed to some version of it, but I think this version of it just feels too broad for me right now to be supportive of. But the commission feels like there's 5 people there now, and it seems like things are hopefully moving in the right direction with the new website and with the world coming back. So I don't feel the urgency of passing something like this so broad.
Thank you, Rocky. Is there a motion to be made? Kim?
Mr. Chair, I move that the select board approve the proposed changes to the bylaws for the Town of Hartford Energy Commission as presented.
I'll second.
We have a second from Dan. All right, we'll do a roll call. Lanny?
Nay.
Rocket?
Nay.
Mary?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
And I will vote yes, 4-2. Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Molly.
All right,
you.
so thanks, Molly.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
You too. All right, so our next item is a resolution that would appoint the Hartford Select Board as the local cannabis control commission. So under this, we would pass a resolution. We would end up being essentially the body that approves or denies license for cannabis, sort of similar to our role as the local liquor control board. So this would be local, it would be us. This is sort of the motion we have on the table. If the board had interest in having a local commission that was staffed of people other than the select board or some combination thereof, we would have to see some new language in front of us. As it is right now, this resolution would make us the local cannabis control commission. So I will open it up to discussion or questions and public comment. Manny?
Yes, Emily, can you approach the podium, please? So the question I was going to ask you before is, do you know how other towns in Vermont are approaching cannabis control boards?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's doing it a little bit differently. So I think really it depends on what's right for the town. And so if we're talking about licensing and just licensing, maybe that's easy enough for the select board to do. When we get to talking a little bit more about like compliance, or what happens when a business needs some support in order to continue, could there be like an advisory team or something like that, as opposed to having a whole other section of another group of people to serve as the local cannabis control board. So I'm trying not to be wishy-washy with what I said earlier. And I think also you can do it a few different ways. So you can be the governing body. I would very strongly advise you to have some kind of advisory team to help you make some of those decisions, especially when it comes to compliance and thinking about keeping our businesses healthy as well as our people in town healthy.
So do you know of any towns or cities that have adopted a cannabis control board as of yet?
Nope. I can't say that I do for sure. I know that it's the recommended with the scope of prevention, it's the recommended way to do that, but I think that's through the scope of prevention.
Okay, thank you. So I'm gonna, follow that. I'm on side if you want to sit down, it's up to you, but unless somebody else has a question for you. But I do have a question, or I guess a comment for the board. So the Hartford Community Coalition, which I am the liaison for, which I'm proud to be, is working for the advocacy of our youth in our town. Is the primary objective of this commission, and they're to be commended on this. And I will frankly stand up here and admit that I do not know beans about cannabis. Okay. And I do not know the effects on youth. I mean, I can be one of those people that honestly say I never tried. I don't know what the effects are. So I really am very protective of the youth in our community, especially with all the other drug problems that we have happening. And I think you need an expert that has dealt with substance abuse to be on the board. That's a primary concern that I have. Substance prevention, substance abuse. I also feel that it's paramount that we have someone from the law enforcement community be on the board as well. That is very important to me to get that input and that background. I also feel, in all fairness, that you should have someone that is pro cannabis in the town to be on the board as well, to have their input, to have a weighted board. And none of us that I know of fit any of those qualifications that I just mentioned before. And I just fail to understand how we can say that we've had alcohol around for ages. And so we understand how that affects our, but we haven't had cannabis around, and that legally. And for us to take on that role as a cannabis control board is a huge ask, in my opinion. And it's a huge responsibility that, quite frankly, I don't think we're up to the task of. There are so many things to be aware of, such as the things that I mentioned, that we need to have some other experts on this board. And that's my opinion. So I will definitely be voting against us taking on the role in any form as a cannabis control board.
Thank you, Lanny. I don't know that we have to be experts about cannabis, but we just have to know, about licensing requirements.
Yeah.
I don't know that any personal or expertise in cannabis itself is necessary. These are applications for licenses, much like we get for liquor. The state, there are very few sort of restrictions against granting these licenses. The state wants this to happen. It's good that we have a local board. I think the select board is fully capable of doing that. It's just the same with the liquor. Like, do people meet the license requirements set up by the state? I don't have to know anything really about cannabis other than whether this person wants to sell a product and they meet the licensing requirements. So I would be in favor of it, but certainly we have board to discuss. Kim.
I was just thinking, actually, while you were speaking, Lenny, I was thinking, oh, well, it'd be interesting to, because I think that this is a lot of responsibility to put on a community-based advisory board. But so I was thinking, if we were the official cannabis control board, local cannabis control board, but that there was a small advisory group of the type of people you just described, that each application would go through, but then also thinking back to what you were saying about the inequity of a student liaison having to go through one more additional, does that put a burden of additional bureaucracy onto a cannabis business as opposed to a restaurant or a bar, or so it'd be interesting. I'm still thinking it could be a possibility. And I'm also thinking, like, in terms of, I put out the question, I don't think I got the answer yet, but I think the answer is probably yes, that would any of the license applications that came before us also go through the Spillman process and through the fire code process like the liquor applications do. So there would be some law enforcement lens looking at each application. Again, I have not verified that, but I think that's quite likely and could be a requirement that we place on those if it's not a state regulation. So I guess where like for accountability purposes, I do think that we should have the authority to approve or reject any license application. But I am not opposed to having an intermediary advisory group to advise the board on their thoughts. And for that matter, as I was mentioning earlier, there's also the opportunity that for any application that comes before us is public document, that if there are people who have more professional knowledge that have concerns, could either share it with us electronically or in public session during the application process. So there is, it's not that we couldn't accept additional information. And the compliance part, I mean, I think certainly like same thing like with compliance with our local liquor or our liquor control laws. There's, law enforcement has some aspect to it, but also, like the enforcement of the Liquor Control Board, they also have inspectors that are going out to check the status. And frankly, if any dispensary is providing cannabis to minors, to youth in our community, I don't think there's any question that would be a huge violation and they would probably be terminated immediately, would be my guess. So, do you have anything you want to say?
Mary?
I was just going to ask Emily, if you thought that the select board isn't the appropriate venue for this, what would you recommend? How would you go about forming a committee for this, for the purpose of the cannabis control?
Yeah, Mary, that's a great question. I think, it's about bringing all of the stakeholders together that have some either, some skin in the game, if you will, right? So, business people on, as well as preventionists, I like the idea of an advisory team. And could certainly live with that. And, if that's something that you folks can kind of commit to without signing the document, that would appeal, I think, to both business and prevention. I will say very much, I think it's really important to note that the fact that you're even talking about this and that you want to take this on prior to September 1st is a huge win for Hartford and a huge win for those of us that really want to move forward in the best way possible. So I do very much appreciate you taking this on and taking this on now.
I just had one other thing.
Go ahead.
I was at the Conservation Commission meeting last night.
Yeah.
And one of the commission members, Ted Levin, said that if we didn't get somebody, he would be willing to be on.
Great.
So I didn't know if you were advertising, if you were reaching out in some way,
Great.
shape or form to try and see who was interested and if they had that kind of background.
Yeah.
But
And just wanting to make sure that we're really following the other plans in Hartford, the energy plan in Hartford as well. Really, really important when we start to think about growing and cultivating, and say nothing about nuisances that happen with various businesses as well.
Yeah.
Tony?
So thank you, Emily. So my question, Mary, and I guess to Kim as well, is what would you see? I mean, I'm warming to the idea of an advisory group, but what would your thoughts be on the makeup of an advisory group?
What I would suggest is, how like when when a group wants to come and form a standing committee or an advisory group to the town, that potential members would get together and draft a charge and bring it to us and say, this is what we would propose to be our role in this process. And whether that means, basically that for each, like the Spillman check and like the fire code violation check, that the application, so maybe it doesn't require an extra step, but that basically the advisory committee, part of it might be that they would, either give it a grade of that they think it should be approved or not, or some sort of like recommendation to the board that that they as a group think that it should happen. I mean, I'm not gonna take on the task of going and recruiting an advisory group, but I think if there's there's interest enough to form something, that then they come to us and say, we'd like to do this.
I appreciate what you're saying as far as not who the actual members of the committee are, but I'd like your thoughts, if I may, on the skills and qualifications that you could see would be beneficial to the advisory committee.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the applicant. What you described sounds fine. I don't know that we're gonna have, unless potentially there is a charge that has criteria for the constitution of this advisory group. It might say must include like one member of the school district and one member of the cannabis business community and one member of law enforcement, even though it will need to go through this Spillman anyway, probably. One member from the healthcare community, so, and then, anyways, so I think there's room for discussion there, and I don't have the answer per se.
And Mary?
Yeah, that's pretty much along the lines that I was thinking, is that I don't know how you reach out to the public other than the way we usually do it. But I also foresee that it would be beneficial to have people say, well, I am a business member. I am interested in this. I am, like you said, someone in the health field, whether doesn't have to be a doctor, a nurse, so it could be anything, but I do think that there are people who out there would be interested in forming a group that would make a charter or whatever, in order to have the committee. And then, again, I don't, of course, I think it's hard to not duplicate some things, but I do think I somewhat agree with Emily that it would be easier for the select board to be able to license something when somebody else has kind of done the pre-work for it, which is what we do with the liquor licenses. So, that's why I asked the question, how would you, how would you foresee a group outside of the select board forming in order to accomplish these goals?
I appreciate the question. I really do. And I appreciate your responses on the makeup of them as well. So thank you very much for your input, both you ladies.
Yeah.
I want to kind of put this in perspective. Is there anyone on the select board that has any medical training background, health training?
I was an EMT for a number of years in the town of Hartford.
So I don't know the proper term if we are the public health board, the town health board, but that is one of the things that we're charged with. And we have one person who has some training. So I see this in that perspective. What I like about this, which Emily, I think, is bringing to us too, is that we as a community have control over this as opposed to someone, at a higher level saying you have to do it this way. So I think that we can all come together to the table and bring the parts of having this group, whoever sits here, being the person who rubber stamps it and approves it, with, as Kim said and other people have said, we gather input from the community of the experts. If it's someone from, Emily's field, if it's Miriam shown from the school. So all those people that we can reach out to, like we do with health issues. We have a committee and a process, and we have to go through this step and get their approval and their recommendation, and brings it to us. So we have all the information in front of us, where again, we just keep that control right here locally, which is going to help us immensely as a town, rather than having the state tell us how we have to do this.
As I say, I'm warming to this idea. So I I understand your thoughts on it. I appreciate that, Dan. Thank you.
I guess something I'm not clear about in this conversation is how much that advisory committee would be a necessary step for applicants or just simply advisory. And also, I just have to comment on the irony of us being an elected committee that just continuously spawns more committees. And I want to be mindful of that. I mean, not to say that it's not important, because I do think that having that expertise is great. But how do we make it so that we form a group that would be useful and relevant and have a charge, but without it being additional steps or burden unnecessarily? So I don't know. So
It seems like to me it would have to be generated from the public. We are the local cannabis control board. We have a group of people who bring to us a charge, either on make it an actual committee or just an advisory or ad hoc group that gets to weigh in on it if that's what they're interested in. I think the select board would ultimately have to have the ultimate say, over yay or nay, but any increased input from citizens would be helpful. But I mean, I think that's something, and it sounds like we have some people who are very interested in this and can sort of spearhead something. So I think it's a fine idea to get as much input as you can. I still think that making the select board the local cannabis commission makes the most sense, and that's something that I'm willing to support tonight. I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but if we get a motion, we'll see what happens.
Hi, Miriam Whitten from White River. As some of you may know, I am applying for a retail cannabis license. I just wanted tonight to say that I do support a local cannabis commission. I think it's important to keep things local. James Pepper, who's the head of the Cannabis Control Board, has done a fabulous job, but they are in Montpelier, it's centralized there. And I think there are certain things that are better set to be done just in the local community. That way you get to know the applicants and you can ask questions. As Michael said, it's very similar to the liquor license process. So I just, as someone in the cannabis space, wanted to show my support to the town adopting a local commission.
Other than the board, other than the select board?
So me and Emily had a long conversation. We always speak a lot, but I'm open to an advisory board as well. I mean, I think the select board, for the reasons Michael stated, have the ability to do it, but certainly for the reasons Emily says as well, if an advisory board wants to be made. But my main point is, I think it should be local.
Russ?
I think the select board should be the ultimate control, but I do think an advisory board would be very important, especially since cannabis can take many different forms in its consumption. And that's something that people would have to be mindful for, because as a result, it's going to be much easier for people who desire to say, take it to school. Because I've known people on medical prescriptions and they have chocolate chip cookies that just look like Chips Ahoy. So some of that intricacies and considerations would be important function of an advisory board, just to keep the select board aware of potential issues and developments in the area.
Thank you, Russ. Dan?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we have a resolution appointing the Hartford Select Board as a local cannabis control commission.
Second.
Second.
Second of Kim, discussion? Danny?
Yeah, I'm gonna vote no on this until we have an advisory committee qualifications in place. I think it's important for all the reasons that have been given that we have already in place an advisory committee instead of, I think we're just putting the horse before the cart on this one. Have the advisory committee requirements drawn up first and then approve us as the commission. Thank you,
Lanny. I think that we don't know if an advisory committee would ever materialize with enough interest. We'd have to draft a charge. This is kind of uncharted territory, and my guess is the sooner we establish ourselves as the local cannabis control board, the better, particularly if new rules and regulations come down to us from Montpelier. Rocket?
Mr. Chair, presumably these licenses would be renewed every year, right? And revoked at any.
They would be renewed. I think I don't know if it's a 1 year, probably it's very similar. It's in the same title as the alcoholic beverages statute.
Right.
So I think a lot's modeled on how we do that.
I think given just the new territory, I mean, an advisory board, I mean, just general education for us with everything that we vote on is always great. But I think that for the point of having local control in the name here and having that sort of direct connection to the applicants makes a lot of sense to me. And that we can always, create a charge and create a commission as we see fit and needed.
Sure. And I feel like the actual establishment of the local board may spur people to want to become part of an advisory board, and they can certainly bring their thoughts or a charge to us, which is good. But I think we do I think it makes sense. I think this is the proper order to get to a system where we have a local board with an advisory group. I got a second.
We have.
I think Dan made the motion. Kim seconded.
I will third.
All right, I'll call the roll just because this is the uncharted territory. So, Lanny.
Start at the other end.
Kim.
Yes.
Dan.
Yes, and I want to add that, maybe this will motivate someone to run for select board so they could be part of this commission.
Mary.
Yes.
Rocket.
Yes.
Lanny.
We gave you all that extra time.
I know.
Take your time. It's fine.
Uncomfortably, I'm going to support this.
Okay, and I will vote aye as well. So it's 6-0-1. All right, thanks, everybody. Okay, so our next item is something that's dear to Rocket's heart, of course. This is our looking into an ordinance that would basically allow for the possession of open containers, consumption of alcohol in public places. And I'll throw it over to Rocket in a minute to sort of talk about what he's thinking about. I believe, our step tonight after hearing this essentially is there support on the board to have the town manager work with us to pursue this as an ordinance that, would come back to us in some form where we would vote yay or nay. So essentially it's a question of do we want to keep looking into this and devoting resources to seeing if this is something we'd like to implement. So Rocket, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kim, thank you for being able to pull this up. So this, you can go to the second slide here. This is a conversation regarding an open container ordinance here in Hartford. These are direct excerpts from our municipal code. Section 19.2 prohibits open containers, and section 125.5 prohibits alcoholic beverages. Section A prohibits open alcoholic beverages in public parks. And this is sort of the direct text copy and paste that will be referenced later. Go to the next slide. So just a quick overview. This issue was brought to me by several business owners downtown in White River, and looking at, they are struggling. As we all know, COVID was tough, the construction is tough, parking issues continue, and they are looking for ways to bolster sales and to have more traffic downtown and to, so that was sort of the initial aspect of it. Looking into it, the current code that we have in place, it's actually a municipal ordinance, which is a ban, as we just saw, banning open container. That was originally, I believe, written in the 80s. It was the new code was refreshed and adopted in 2003. And the question that I have is it time to possibly revisit this and to reconsider this almost 20-year-old ordinance? Next slide. So the question is there a way that we can responsibly explore open container, allowing adults to consume alcohol in public spaces? So really that last part here is the in public spaces part that we're considering. Next slide, please. So with respect to open container, I did this sort of just general cost benefit, and I've spoken to dozens of people in town, citizens, business owners, community leaders, and the pros are really economic in nature, and then also from more of an intangible, the freedom and the responsibility that we entrust our adult citizens to have. And as a residual of that, the potential positive reputation that Hartford might gain for not only being able to entrust its citizens and guests, but also as being a welcoming place where some of these liberties are granted to visitors. There are very obvious cons, and I want to be really clear that I personally am supportive of having some sort of open container ordinance, but I am also extremely wary of bringing this because, you know, if we were to pass something like this and something terrible were to happen, I would feel personally culpable and very horrible. So I do take these cons very, very seriously, particularly with health and safety. And then I think secondarily with potential increase in garbage litter. As for both pros and cons, there may be other factors unconsidered or unmentioned here. So these are very serious cons, and I do think that Emily mentioned this in public comment, and I'm sure other members of our community have brought these up to me, that I think that we need to give a lot of consideration to in considering this. Next slide, please. So there are communities around the country that do have some form of open container. Most of them are not comparable, like Savannah, Georgia, or Las Vegas. But here in Vermont, Stowe has had an open container ordinance, or has permitted open container, let's say. The current town manager, Charles Safford, this is a direct quote from him. For anyone who can't read it or see it in front of them, it says, "People are liable for their own actions. No one has tried to sue the municipality regarding open bottle use or anything related since I have been the town manager for 15 years. Other than at special events, the Stowe Arena after a game, or an outdoor bar, I haven't witnessed anyone consuming alcohol outside." An additional conversation with an officer on the Stowe Police Department ranged a lot. That conversation focused pretty heavily on the pretty high rate of DUIs that they have in Stowe, but he sort of cited that as a result of the high number of drinking establishments they have, and also the high percentage of tourist traffic that they have. He was sort of reluctant to tie that directly to an open container permission. So again, Stowe and Hartford, and some citizens have rightly pointed out, we are different communities. And so this is not directly comparable, but it is something within Vermont that we can look at. So the long-term solution in terms of creating, if we were to move forward or move toward an open container policy, is to eliminate the two municipal ordinances, section 19.2 and section 125.5 that I had cited earlier. De facto, if we eliminated those, these other two ordinances listed, 19.3 and 19.4, would become irrelevant. 19.3 is basically requiring liquor permits for public events. You wouldn't need that if you already had open container. And 19.4 is the violations and penalties, which if open container was permitted, there would be no violation, there would be no penalty. And I do want to pause here and talk briefly about section 19.4, the violations and penalties, as an additional motivator for myself in exploring this. Within the violations and penalties, and I guess I should have included it in this, but it is within our published municipal code. A violation can result in a penalty of a fine of up to $500 for the first fine, but which is pretty high if you were thinking about, depending on the infraction, let's say. But it also comes tied to the potential penalty of a misdemeanor charge. So that's a pretty high stakes penalty, in my opinion, for something that arguably, I mean, depending on what side of a rope line that you drink on, could be seen as pretty punitive in nature. And I think that myself personally, I sort of balked at reading that degree of violation, that degree of penalty, where I said, that's something that could theoretically, in absence of court diversion, end up on someone's rap sheet or have to be reported because you were on the wrong side of a rope line or something of that sort. Now, granted, it is also generally unspoken and generally accepted knowledge that there are members of our community who do carry open containers in our community. The difference here is that it is typically not enforced. And I think for myself, in terms of thinking, I think that is a result of people not knowing that the penalty is potentially so high. I think if you had as you're a public citizen and you thought that maybe cracking this beer at the park might result in you having a misdemeanor charge, I think people would think twice about that. But in my personal opinion, I think that it seems that the issue is potentially more on the punitive side of how high that is potentially, more than it is a judgment error on that individual's portion. The municipal code is several hundred pages long, so difficult to know all the nuances of that rule. So it is sort of, that became sort of a personal driver for me in terms of exploring this further to say, are we being too punitive about this? And we can have a longer conversation about whether or not we should totally eliminate all of this or we should do a scaled back version, but this is just sort of painting the big long-term picture. The next slide, please. So just to be super clear, things that would not change, all federal and state laws governing alcohol. So minimum drinking age, DUIs, dram laws, public nuisance, disorderly conduct. All of these things would be enforced just as much as they are now. Additionally, private businesses, private landowners, leaseholders would have the right to use or to choose what to allow within their spaces or not. That as is current law and practice now. Next slide, please. So in terms of considering a conversation about open container, I think that if we were to just say, okay, well, let's jump straight to the long-term solution and eliminate those ordinances. I personally think that's pretty extreme. I would not be comfortable with that, and I would not be supportive of that, because there are, I think, as we mentioned, the cons list, there are unknown consequences. We don't know how this will affect our community. I think we can look at Stowe, but we cannot take Stowe's numbers and say those would be our numbers, Stowe's anecdotes and say those would be our own. So I would personally encourage the board that we be err on the side of caution. With that said, I am supportive of moving that direction, but if we debate it sort of indefinitely and say, well, these are the pros and these are the cons and go back and forth, it will always be hypothetical. Like the only way that we will ever be able to know is to somewhat test the hypothesis and see what the outcome is. So what's the balance? Next slide, please. My proposal to the select board, and obviously this is something that will have to go through, I guess, the town manager and a further consideration and for final vote. This is me just sort of thinking through the issue here. I think that after a lot of thought and conversation, sort of a Goldilocks solution right in the middle might be pertinent. Now there's conversations, town manager Tracy was inquired with VLCT as to whether or not we can actually temporarily suspend ordinances. And it seems like maybe not. It seems like we might need to actually eliminate them, but then we could create a companion ordinance to reinstate, I guess, at the end. So it would be like a technicality of the process.
The other ways to like thread that needle. Sorry.
So we can navigate it. It's just not gonna be as simple as like a temporary pause or suspension. That's what I was hoping, but it seems like we're gonna have to work through some technicalities of that process. But my thinking was that if we did a very limited experiment and, in my ideal, moving more quickly than not, but while we have warm months, while we have visitor traffic, while we have people out and about using the parks and public facilities, public spaces, that between now and maybe the end of the year could be an interesting trial period for our community to say, what would it be like if we had an open container ordinance or allowed that within our community? And that as a select board, we maintain close contact with town manager and department heads to keep us apprised of any ongoing changes, so that at any moment we can say, okay, this experiment is not working, we pull the plug, revoke it, and immediately reinstate the existing ordinances as they are. So just trying to be really careful about that downside to say, okay, what if this experiment goes awry? How do we protect our community and make sure that we're doing right by them, especially, as Emily mentioned, our youth? So again, that little bullet point there, my suggestion is that we just try it. And there are many ways that we could limit open container. We could do it by geographic zoning. We could do it by hours. We could do it by limiting it to consumption of beverages only purchased at local establishments. So there's any number of ways that we could be creative about restricting it. I personally would lean to not doing that and just seeing where the stress points are and where the stress points are, so that we have better information of fine tuning it as we go down the road. But obviously open to your thoughts and discussion here. So the next slide, please. So I've talked about this pretty at length here, but the benefits of this process is really just trying it out so that we are not living forever in the limbo of hypothetical debate, but rather committing ourselves to a process where we say, Just like prohibition was probably too extreme, maybe some of these municipal ordinances set in place 20 to 40 and plus years ago, maybe it's time to modernize our approach to this. And just being generally cautious about it. One thing it would also allow us is to have a constant dialogue about this as it happens. So we have, from now to the end of the year, the option and the opportunity for extensive dialogue with more community members and community leaders, town staff, town manager, and so forth, to really understand what's happening in our community as this develops. Next slide, please. So really, I just put this as sort of like an imagine as positive use cases, because it's very easy to think about open container and think fearfully about all the adverse outcomes of public drunkenness or kids getting hold of alcohol and so forth. Some of these were ideas that were brought to me, some of these through conversation, and some of these were ideas of my own, but generally thinking that, there are, for all the scary parts, ways that we could imagine open container going awry, there are also many beautiful use cases. And I'm somebody that is an optimist generally, but I also love people and trust people. And I think that the best way to get people to act responsibly is to entrust them with responsibility. So I think that there are many potential wonderful outcomes of this as well. And that is my theory. The end.
Thank you, Rocket. Does anyone have any questions or comments? I think what we need to decide is whether we want to, have the town manager and the rest of us pursue this in some fashion, or whether it's just not something we want to do right now. And so, I'll open it up to questions or comments. I don't know if we need a formal vote, personally, as a proposal just to, legalize open containers, I don't know if I'd vote for that. If there were, geographic restrictions or something, I might be willing to, consider that. But, I feel like doesn't mean I wouldn't necessarily want to foreclose like the option of coming to some type of agreement that everyone thinks might be good. The downtown seems like the obvious place for this if it can be, sort of bounded geographically. The pullovers on Route 14, Hartford Avenue, I don't necessarily see those as places we want people just like drinking beer, I will also mention, I think something, having it somewhat contained makes some sense. When I was a younger man and I spent more time in Hanover, it was discovered at one point that Hanover had no prohibition on open containers since the late 90s. And so once someone realized that, everybody just started like drinking like downtown on the benches. And Select Board in Hanover got rid of that in literally like 48 hours, they were like, nope, we're not doing that. So, when I think of this as being something that I could support, I think it would probably be like in certain geographical areas, and there's lots of considerations. Hours, like, is this for beer and wine? Is it okay if people just like have a bottle of Jack they're going to pass around, right? There's a lot of different things, trash, frankly, availability of bathrooms. If you're drinking, it's like a serious thing. I'm not, that's something you got to think about if it's downtown. I'd also want to know, right now establishments are able to, like, when you order pickup to go, you can get like alcoholic beverages. That was part of COVID. So I don't know if that's like a long-term thing, or if going forward, like an establishment, we need to get like a second-class license and basically like sell beers to go or something, right? Or do you just go to the co-op or Cumbies or someplace and buy something and then just take it to the park? So I think they're questions, I'm not against. I personally, wouldn't be against, looking at this further. That's just my thought on it. Yep.
Couple things. So, Rocket, did you speak with anyone at the Department of Liquor Control?
No, I did not.
And so basically you're just using STO as a reference for any
For the legality of it? Yeah.
Okay.
Well, because we have a municipal ordinance that simply bans the consumption.
I was just curious. I actually put a call into the Liquor Control Board today, but I haven't heard back yet. But when I got your slide deck and I was looking at like, oh, get a drink at trail break and go into Kishko while you wait for your thing. And I thought, well, what happened? Like, I have a second class license in my business operation. If someone comes into my business with a glass of wine or beer, like, what is my liability in that case? Or what is my, where does that overlap? And then even like when you were just saying, or was in here that you wouldn't need a permit for outdoor events, like you still would need a permit as a licensed caterer to do an event outdoor, like for example, as just an individual, I don't think I would still be able to, like, if we had an open container law, I don't think I could just throw a party and serve alcohol. Like, I think there's some caveats there that I think regardless of the open container factor would still come in. So personally, I would want like a full kind of discussion with a member of the Liquor Control Board about the impacts of the legal aspects about it. Not that I'm sure most of your points were accurate, but you know, what defines public space? Like, is the you know, an art gallery or a flower shop, or
No.
you know, like,
Well, those would be private businesses. So they, like, just like with masking, they could require a mask or, you know, something like that. So if you had a business and you didn't want someone to carry in, you could, that would be your space and your right to deny
right,
that.
okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And the other thing I was thinking about was, like, we've only heard from you about this, and I know you've talked to a lot of people, but I'm curious if you invited any proponents of this to join this evening and
No.
or.
No, just if it felt like it would be a discussion, like
Yeah.
a, you know,
So I
preliminary
think it
conversation.
would be, I mean, almost to the point of where I think if I were gonna like really support it, we can have maybe not a formal, but an informal petition of
Sure.
like community members who really supported this, just to get, you know, to have a, you know, it ultimately is our decision. We are representatives of the town. That's not a requirement.
Yeah.
But I think I would feel more persuaded, particularly with the business community, if it's something that's like limited to, you know, I think Mike's right that we would either need to delineate it or think about it beyond downtown. Like, we can't just like focus the lens on this is what it looks like in downtown White River Junction,
Right.
unless we're going to limit it to that, because then we need to really look at what it looks like in all the other villages and areas of the town.
Right.
And I think that's all of my comments. I mean, like, principally philosophically, like, I'm not opposed to the idea. It's been talked about for a number of years, like, oh, wouldn't it be great? I like the idea of if there is an opportunity to try it out temporarily and see how it goes if we get to that point. And the other thing I would say is, and you know, I've talked about this a little bit, is that yes, this is a new pursuit that we're potentially going to ask staff to take on more. And I have to say, I'm currently waiting on a bunch of, you know, like, there's stuff in the queue that I think keeps getting reprioritized within the town that I would just want to emphasize that this might not make it to the top of the list when there's already things that are getting reprioritized, including, you know, ticketing for responding to emails from community members. Like,
Sure.
You know, there are a number of things that I think, whatever we have the organizational capacity to do, that it's not reasonable to say, here's a new one, let's put it on top.
Sure.
That's just a personal perspective, but I think it's worth sharing. That's all I got.
Dan?
I just, I'm not adamantly opposed to this. I'm not sure I support it, but I just want to make sure that a key player that needs to be brought to the table is Department of Liquor Control, obviously, as we move forward, to make sure that we're adhering to, you know, the rules for Class 2 licenses. And if someone opens on their spaces, which are the stores, that's technically illegal now. So we have to be very clear about private property versus public property and where that liability line is.
Right. I mean, my understanding is that the private property and the service of liquor, like all those licenses, that's still the establishments, that's all private property. So the municipal ordinance that we have right now governs the consumption of beverages on public property, in public spaces. So that's sort of the delineation.
I understand that, but if you think, if Hartford, if someone says, oh, you can, has an open an open container law, so I'm gonna run to the co-op and pick up a 6-pack of beer and crack it on the way out the door. Well, technically, you can't do that on the property because they're a Class 2 liquor license and you can't have open
Right.
containers there.
Right.
So do they know where that line is? Is it the sidewalk? Is it the space? Is it the street? Is it the grass across the street? So I'm just saying, we need to be careful that the business community has some weight in this to make sure that they're not gonna find themselves getting fined or losing their liquor licenses
Yeah.
for
That makes sense.
something that's not drastically clear.
Mary?
I'm thinking, and being a parent and a former teacher, I would not be in favor of some of this. I think, wouldn't it be great to be able to do this at this park? And I'm going, my first instinct was, no, I don't want kids seeing other people just drinking there. They could drink at home with, in the privacy of your own home, your parents drink, majority, but out in the public, I just think kids have so much on their table, on their plates, that they have to contend with. And I think adding this to it, that was the one thing that stood out for me, that really bothered me. And I just think we have so many options to drink at so many establishments. I guess I'm, I haven't totally settled, but I'm kind of weighing on the negative side. I just wanted to let you know that.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I am, I guess at this point, neutral on this. My concern is that this is trying to find a solution for a problem that doesn't exist. I haven't seen any business establishments within the town of Hartford come and say, hey, we really want to have an open container permit. I'm going to echo what Kim said. There haven't been people that have come to us and say, hey, I really want to be able to drink a beer out in the, the park. I'm just not seeing a need for that. I have to echo what the town manager, you put in your presentation of Stowe said that for the last 15 years, other than special events, Stowe Arena or outdoor bar, I haven't witnessed anyone consuming alcohol outside. So is there the need for an alcohol for a open container permit in the town of Hartford? I don't see that need being expressed other than by yourself through personal conversations with managers of drinking establishments. And until that can be brought to us, I personally, if that can be brought to us, I may have a different opinion, but until that can be brought to us, where you can have some of the vendors in town that are going to be affected by this, I personally don't see the need to move forward with it. I also do have a problem, and I hate to be stereotypical, but we do have a homeless population in the town of Hartford, and we have mental illness in the town of Hartford, and we have people that will be consuming alcohol as a result of that mental health issues in the town of Hartford, and they will be consuming it in public places. And I am with Mary that I don't want to see that take place in public places. I don't want to see public intoxication take place. And we're fighting a battle right now as it is with homelessness. And there's a lot of the homeless that, again, I'm trying not to stereotype, but you see them go into a bar, into the store, pick up a 12-pack and then carry it back to their homeless encampment.
But Laney, that's a public space.
But I realize that, but what I'm
So
saying.
right now, all those homeless people are risking the violation and penalty.
Right.
Or misdemeanor.
But what I'm saying is that if they can freely drink it in a public park, they're not going to go back that far. They're going to drink it in a park. Okay, they're not going to go as far as their encampment. They're going to say, I can drink it here because it's chronic alcoholism.
Sure.
Okay, if you have chronic alcoholism, somebody's not going to say, I'm going to wait till I get back to the park. I can drink this right here in the park and do this. So at this point, Rocket, I cannot support this. If there's more data that you can bring back to me that would influence me to change my mind as far as actual need for this, or to address some of the concerns that have been brought, I could see myself supporting it. But at this point, I think there's a lot of, the other thing is the liability of the town, I guess. We're insured through VLCT, and I would want to check with VLCT as far as what that would be for our liability aspects. So at this point, I'm not in a position to say yes to carry it forward.
Okay, thanks, Lenny.
Yeah, so I hear primarily DLC and VLCT liability as concerns. And then also zoning, like the parameters around that, as well as business, like hearing from the business community about their support of it. I will happily get a list of a petition of support. But trying to figure out, like, like involving people in that process where they may not want to be named at the start or whatever. So just bring this to discussion. So I will do that, and I'll bring that back to the board.
I think the question is, do we want now to sort of give a authorization for the town manager as well to sort of carry forward with this, just because, if we want to hear from like department heads and all that stuff, we probably want to at least give some authorization to the town manager to move forward. I mean, what are people's thoughts on that?
I would,
Have we?
I'm sorry. I'd want to see that a certificate of need, basically certificate of need. I mean, I don't see this, as I said, I don't see this as a need or as a problem that needs to have a solution. So until you can show me that there's a problem, demonstrate it's a problem that needs a solution, I don't feel that we need to be wasting be utilizing staff time in something of this nature. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I agree in the sense that, I mean, I think I'd be willing to authorize the town manager to just get a simple statement of feedback from, but honestly, like, I think even for town staff, we need to provide more information to them first, like, not, because otherwise it's
What
just
sort of
kind of a
information?
personal opinion.
Just
I mean,
the VLCT and
VLCT, DLC,
Okay.
Community, like stakeholder interest, if not commitment, or,
Sure.
And then, whether or not there are parameters or not, because I think that would impact.
Well, that would be a discussion for the select board, really, to figure out the parameters of, right?
Perhaps, but it might be, yeah, so it might be
Because
influenced.
my proposal right now is no parameters so that we can figure out where the stress points are. But if the select board has other parameters that we'd like to see restricted, then I'm certainly open to narrowing that and, figuring that out. I just don't really know what to present to people because it's so amorphous right now. I mean, my approach right now is just say, okay, we have this like pretty puritanical approach right now with the historic ordinance. How do we go about approaching it in a way that would be supportive of the voices that I've heard from? So if there are modifications to that we need to make as a board, then that's totally great. And I just would love some guidance from the board about what to bring to. So yeah.
I mean, I think if you could ask for basically a general opinion from VLCT and from Department of Liquor Control, and provide some stakeholder, it doesn't even have to be identified potentially, but some stakeholder.
How did I do that beyond what I did tonight? If I don't identify them, I
think they could be identified.
Yeah, I mean,
there's not any real,
I don't know. I mean,
different
I think, well, sometimes it can be perceived as having a self-interest which is important and whatever. I mean, I don't really know.
Yeah.
The other thing is, like, for example, I heard from a librarian who basically said, this would be great because we have a public space that we are constantly trying to program and fill. And part of the thing, like, they could do like sip and paint or things like that, but these are different ideas that are brought up.
Under the current laws, they can do BYOB in their.
In the public library?
If it's a private event, yes.
I think it would be like hosted by the, I don't know.
Yeah, anyway.
In any case, this was brought to me in conversation. So I'm trying, I'm trying to be judicious and err on the side of caution in terms of, in all fronts. So specific guidance here would be great. So liability, VLCT, DLC, and stakeholders.
Right, and then basically, because like this is the same kind of information we're asking. So if you can collect that information and come back then I might be able to say, okay, let's ask the town manager to get input from staff based on that information.
Sure.
That would
Okay.
be, I think that would be reasonable. Otherwise, we're just asking them for their personal opinion, basically. I mean, relating to their position as town employees, but they don't have any more information than we do right now. And I don't feel like we have enough information.
What about providing, I guess I'm unclear as to what these things would provide to a town, like a department head, that would affect their opinion as to how it would affect their operations. Does that make sense?
It just
In
gives
absence
a
of-
broader context
Okay.
of the whole situation. Basically, like not them having to wonder, does an outdoor event still need a permit or not? Or does, it basically just gives more complete information before we take their really valuable time that they are already stressed in doing
Sure.
all the other stuff that we're asking.
Yeah, it's a little chicken and the egg, it feels like, because I'm trying to get information to the select board, but the select board, it's back and forth. That's fine. I will do this and I'll send that to the select board.
It might be helpful, looking at the presentation you had, like you had a sort of people's examples, like this would be great if I could go have a picnic in
Yeah.
the park, right?
Right.
And so maybe, and I could certainly, talk to you about it. It's like maybe we craft an ordinance that allows that to happen, right? Just for proposal purposes for the board, but excludes, where it's wide open, it can ultimately be really abused, and so is that like, yeah, you can have beer or wine, yeah, with a meal during a certain time at a certain place, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's one thing. I mean, because those examples, when you see them in the presentation are definitely the ones where you're like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. Why can't I just go have a sandwich, and sit down and have a beer with it, right? I think the idea is like, can we get a proposal for the board that's like narrow enough so that's allowable, but me walking down the street with like a bottle of whiskey, just for the impunity maybe isn't.
We have, an example might be, Mr. Chair, is that we have concerts in the park.
Yeah.
And we want to allow someone to bring a bottle of wine.
Right, yeah.
And about a bottle in.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it seems like, how can we let people at events or get together and have a responsible, responsibly bring alcohol without, having to go sit in a bar and drink it or get into trouble, right? So, I mean,
Right.
if it's just anything goes any place, like, you can just imagine the worst, and certainly it could happen. But, I would just say, yeah, if you, I mean, but, this is sort of your proposal, but, certainly something like that would give us more, maybe to show, maybe if we want to take that step and be like, Tracy, talk to some folks, what if this was for, events or things at certain times and places, and,
Right.
so
I
that's
mean,
just a thought.
it's tricky because we could make it endlessly nuanced.
Yeah, no, that's
Um,
true.
And that's, but we could make it endlessly nuanced without thinking through, and that's where my proposal of keeping it so broad comes from, whereas it's gonna be impossible for us to think through all the different potential use cases
Yeah.
that might work or may not work. Because if you did beer and wine, but what about liquor that's been diluted down to 2%? I mean, so you could do ABV, you could do BAC, there's sort of like so many different iterations of it. And if you did just downtown districts, well, does that benefit the citizens of our community, of certain parts of our community, by exempting them from the penalties and violations, whereas someone wilder still carrying a hard kombucha from their house to the neighbors down the public sidewalk is risking a misdemeanor. Not that it would be enforced, but they are technically in violation of ordinance. So you could see where that would be seen as really preferential and quite difficult. And actually, you probably would see, to be honest, some of the more fearful outcomes or the negative outcomes in these downtown districts than you would see in a neighborhood where someone is literally just going to cross yards to their friends, or to the neighbors. So I think that's where I find it really difficult to dive into the details of that, where I say we really are going to have a difficult time, I think, predicting what's going to be pain points and what won't be. But it definitely, I mean, in the liability side, from a public perspective, I can't imagine why Hartford would be more at risk than Stowe in terms of a VLCT insurance liability standpoint, but I admittedly have not gone to VLCT for that, so I will do that extra research and speak to DLC.
They
I
might
can't.
pay more. I mean, they might.
They may not be insured through VLCT.
Oh, so that may be possible too. But
We are insured through them.
Yeah.
So I will dig into that. As far as DLC, I mean, DLC really governs private business and private property. So the ordinances we're talking about Well,
No,
Well, there's-
enforcement of violations as well, like
Sure. With the liquor the ordinance in question is a municipal ordinance, not a state statute. So, but yeah, I appreciate all this feedback. I will, with all your permission, I will go back to these different parties, get stakeholders and share that with you.
Yeah.
I don't see as if there should be any problem with an establishment being willing to give their name saying, I'd like to.
I don't know. I didn't ask, honestly.
If someone would like to be a part of the group to have outside permits, doesn't bother me. I mean, that doesn't mean that we're gonna take their license away or anything. There's no retaliation.
No, I
That's
understand.
foolishness, but.
I think it can be also for the perception of Lanny, where, you could see where there have been fears expressed about how permitting open container could be seen as encouraging, the sight of children seeing adults drink alcohol, which they do at festivals, they do at restaurants, they do everywhere, but you could see where you say we're increasing those boundaries. I mean, even me proposing this at all makes me look like a municipal cutter and encouraging this and so forth. So I do understand that. So I think that I haven't asked any businesses and I don't see why they might or might not be opposed to that, but I'll ask.
So you haven't asked businesses?
No, I haven't asked them to state their names publicly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
But I also want to clarify, Lanny, I have just spoken to business owners that do not have liquor licenses and who have been very fully supportive of that.
Good. Good.
But I will go and get names and I'll drum it up and I'll bring it back to you all. If that's the permission of the table here, or I guess the movement the board would like to make.
Not on this topic, but I want to ask a clarifying question. I realized that I did not read the recommended motion for the cannabis thing. Should we do that now so it's official and it's in the language that was presented while we're still here on the same day, or does it matter? What do you think?
What was the motion that you actually
I
said?
said that a resolution appointing the Hartford Select Board as a local cannabis control board, and I didn't say with the attached resolution or authorizing the town manager to develop administrative processes. So I don't know if those.
Yeah, we should probably do that.
I just think
Yeah.
now is the time to correct if people are okay with that.
So Rocket, let's finish this up.
Yeah.
Bring
This is,
back
I mean, I use
some
really
info
discussion
for
more
the-
than anything. So.
Okay.
I mean, am I getting the implicit or explicit consent of the board to continue pursuing this with, just down these other avenues and I'll bring more research back next meeting.
Okay,
Okay,
I think that's fine.
thank you.
Dan, did you want to make a motion?
Yes, so if I could rescind the previous motion and restate it, I think just for clarity, that would help. So that the select board authorize the attached resolution for local cannabis control commission and direct the town manager to develop the administrative process for the select board to act as the local cannabis control commission.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I with trepidation. Yes, again, so.
Sorry, Lana.
Okay.
No, I have it.
Yeah, good deal, Anna. All right, that brings us to commissioner reports. If anyone's got any, I'll start with Kim and go down this way.
Don't forget a minute. You can you start?
Sure. So I don't really report on the Energy Commission since there's something in there. And you think for the life of me, I could remember what the tree of the month is, and it's the honey something, but I can't remember what it is. The honey. I don't know.
Honeysuckle?
Suckle, maybe. I don't think it's suckle. I think it's something
Honey
else.
locust.
The honey locust. Thank you.
That's
Yes. So look for that around town.
That's good. Kim, do you want to?
Sure. Design Review Committee met on July 7th and unanimously approved an application by Northern Stage for a proposed multi-unit dwelling and performing arts facility, and which I was not able to attend, but that's from their minutes. And the Planning Commission met last night and approved an application for the Upper Valley Haven and St. Paul's Church for site development plan, and they added a condition for a modification to the parking lot, which made the following application have to continue because they're gonna have to do a redesign of their whole proposal. So things are still up in the air, going slow, but they do have an upcoming workshop, I think, scheduled for August 10th, I believe, for the, they're gonna finally get back to that RV zoning question. So yeah, and then they've got tons of other stuff they're working on.
Okay, Mary?
Yeah, Hartford Conservation Commission met last night. They first discussed a resident's concern regarding mountain bikers on Hurricane Wildlife Refuge land and cut timber alongside a shared road where only the owners have right of way as well as public works. No trespassing signs were recommended, as well as locked fencing and outreach. The climate action plan's achievable strategies in the short term include insulating the Bugby Center, addressing the heating system needs at Public Works Department, and moving police cruisers to hybrids as vehicles need replacing. Better wetland mapping was discussed, as well as educational strategies provided to the public for healthy forest management before, during, and after the timber harvest, as well as a permanent educational series as outreach. And as I stated before, Parks and Rec sponsors the 10K, 5K bike races on July 23rd this summer that include large sections of the town forest and typically garners approximately 100 racers for the event.
Okay, thanks, Mary. Rocket, anything?
No, but just a comment on the Bugby Senior Center, as I was there recently, they replaced their HVAC system with heat pumps because they were having tons of roof leaks, but now they're apparently their heating, their insulation is horrible. So they're shredding energy, just trying to keep that building at temperature. So
Even though they just got a new roof.
it's the insulation, I think.
Yeah, we saw.
Yeah, we saw that.
Yeah, so.
Okay, Lanny, anything?
All my stuff's coming up. So no.
Okay, I don't really have anything either. So the consent agenda, I'll take a motion if we leave out the contract for namely and the loan amendment for combined sewer outflow, because we want to take those.
Or we can first and second it, but did we officially move that August 9th meeting to the 16th? I know you sent out
I believe,
we just get consensus from the board now that that's.
so August 9th is the primary, right? So I think we wanted to move it to the next week so people can go to the polling place or vote or.
I do, yeah, I do have a question, I'm sorry, yeah, about the structural turnout gear bid award.
Okay, you want to just take that out?
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question about that as well. Sorry, I didn't bring that up before.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So let's take out structural turnout gear bid award, contract for namely loan amendment for combined sewer outflow from the consent agenda. I think the 16th is what we'll do for the meeting because tonight's the primary.
Do you have a question for tonight or you want to bring it back?
Bring it back. I had a question of the chief about this. Basically what I want to know about is if we're in a strategy to replace turnout gear every year instead of this huge chunk of turnout all at once.
Yeah.
I'd like to know if
that's
we,
good.
I mean,
We'll take it out for
It
next
says
time.
that it's from a reserve account that.
I understand, but I mean, it just seems like it's every 5 years when it's ready to be replaced, we're going to be hit with this again. And I just would like to know that we are on a rotational basis to replace it as needed, like a set of turnout gear every year versus all of it at one shot would be, in my opinion, be the better way to go about this.
All right, let's take it out. We'll bring it up next meeting. Okay, Dan.
All right, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the payroll ending 7/9/2022, approve meeting minutes of 6/28 and 7/6/2022, approve AP manifest of 7/8 and 7/12/2022, approve select board meetings of 8/16 and 8/23. Did we already approve the 7/19?
It doesn't, it's not a public meeting.
Okay, gotcha.
so I
Okay,
think
so
we
it's
don't
okay.
have to-
Approve the select board chair to sign the manifest for August 9th, 2022, and approve the contract for the line striping. I think that's it, right?
You can also do
Water
a contract for
filtration.
water filter.
Yeah,
Oh,
water
sorry,
replacement.
contract for water filter media replacement.
A second the motion.
For the second for Lanny. Those in favor, say aye. Okay, looks like it's unanimous. All right, so we talked about moving executive session, but we decided we would go into it, I think. So if anyone wants to make a motion, we can go in to executive session. If we have enough votes. Kim?
Yeah, okay. I move that the select would go into executive session due to the body has made a specific finding that premature general public knowledge would clearly place the state, municipality, or other public body on a or a person involved at a substantial disadvantage, it may go into executive session. Sorry, not really.
And we'll go into
We
executive.
will go into
session.
executive session. How do I say this?
Contracts.
Just say to discuss one of the following.
Okay, yes,
Pretty
we're
broad.
going to the executive session to discuss one of the following: contract, labor, retention agreements with employees, arbitration, or mediation.
Second.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, Laney's opposed. We are going into executive session.
And I'm gonna sign out of Zoom.
All right,
I move that we exit executive session.
seconds, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, we're out of executive session. We took no formal action. So I will take a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, Mr. Chairman, sorry, make a motion to adjourn. Mr. Motion. Mr.
Do
Motion.
we have a second?
I second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Sorry about that, Mr. Motion.
That's all right.
This is awesome getting out here a little after 9.
You were cruising.
Because we're gonna have such a.
I know.